All right, and the recording is started. Say something, just real quick.
Yeah, so here I am being me, waiting for us to start this.
Okay, well, you know what? You don't need to call me out on being very bad at this. Anyway, this will be episode two, or technically, well, episode two of the podcast, but we are dealing with episode three of DS9. So,
Yeah, past
uh,
prologue.
yeah, let's talk about that. I like the title, Past Prologue, because it is quite literally past the prologue of the story, but it's also just, I
Yeah,
think it's a catchy title. And does it have anything to do with the episode? Because this is the.
it references the past that we're going to deal with Kira of uh, like she's past what we might call her prologue of being a resistance fighter, but the subject of the episode is kind of like dealing with that baggage of like people expecting her to still act that way even though she's past it.
Yeah, okay. I
Um,
mean, I think that's pretty fair. I think that's a good assessment. So, I guess we'll do this beforehand because we'll probably be restructuring how this works. I thought this was a pretty okay episode. I don't think it's amazing. I think it's
hmm,
probably a good thing right off the sort of very, very plot heavy, very story heavy first two episodes, where we kind of get something that's a
mhm,
little bit more. It's almost like a small scale sort of
mhm.
character focused episode on Kira. I probably give this like a B minus. There were some good highlights in it, but overall, it's kind of just a okay episode. Like it's not amazing. They put their first good foot out the door, and this is kind of just a good second step. Not like amazing, not incredible. What would you say?
Um, yeah, that's pretty much what I say. It's a good I think it's good to just show like here's what our standard formula is going to be for this first season of when they're still not doing a lot of continuity and such. They're still like getting some details set up of like who these people are and how they'll generally interact beyond just the opening, event episodes
Mm-hmm.
of like here's how standard life is on the station when rather than it being a climactic you know what would be the word, not galaxy changing but basically sector altering like event when it's just like this is a problem that's local to the area
Yeah,
and it's not.
this is definitely an episode I think very emblematic of DS9 in terms of the themes and ideas. In terms of the
Hmm.
quality, I would again like I think I'd give it kind of a B minus. It's good, but I don't think there's anything great in it per se, other than well, we're gonna get to the first scene with some of the best interactions with the best character.
Hmm.
But I think overall this is kind of a like if the first episode because we didn't give a grade to the first episode. What would you say like the first like two parter would be? I would say it's an A
Oh,
definitely.
yeah, it's an A. It sets up everything you need perfectly for that episode, and we get the conclusion when it like,
Well,
and
introducing the
there's
whole
never
setting.
yeah, it introduces the whole setting. It introduces everyone pretty well. It's not like, not to compare it, like not to be a downer on TNG, but if you remember, Far Point Station, it was very much, the way it was written was basically two separate episodes smashed together, and it shows of like Riker is introduced rather awkwardly along with I think Beverly and Wesley, like just halfway through they're introduced, and it's like, well, you're kind of just shoehorned in
Yeah.
for the episode. While in the case of the emissary, it's like, yeah, we naturally push through it of like we get introduced to Cisco and then Jake. Like, yeah, this is their dynamic, and then from there it's just naturally like, hey, this is just stuff he has to deal with as the commander of the station. Before all that is built up into the main like conflict that comes up, all of it ties together very well.
Yeah, and I think part of what makes Emissary a lot better is there's some
Mm-hmm.
weird scenes in Emissary, but we know where they go. They're intentionally there to call later to stuff that we're going to see either in this season or in later seasons. So his meeting with the Opaka, that's a bit weird. He just goes to this weird like religious woman after he's gotten his space station, and she's
Yeah.
measuring his paw and saying, "Oh, by the way, you're our prophet." Obviously, that has to do with stuff in that episode, but it's more in the sense
Mm-hmm.
of that seems a little weird in Star Trek, but
Mm-hmm.
we know where that's going. When it comes to Farpoint Station, like Q is not the norm for that show, even though he appears a lot. Things to do with
Yeah.
Q are very like this is not what you're going to get in the standard Star Trek episode, and this is not really what the series is about. So, Emissary, I
Mm-hmm.
think is emblematic of what we're going to see throughout the series. We're going to see interesting morality conflicts. We're going to see a darker side of Star Trek. We're going to see the conflict between Cardassians, Bajorans, the Prophets, and all these sorts of things. That's all introduced in Emissary. The only thing that really carries over from Farpoint to the rest of TNG is the characters and Q. Like the conflict that Q even sort of presents is not really carried over in later Q episodes. Because if you remember, in that first episode, he's basically judging humanity.
Yeah.
But in later episodes, it's kind of just it's time for wacky fun times with Q, and we're actually going to get a Q episode in DS9 this season, the only one in DS9. But
no, there is one episode where he does again test. Well, 2 episodes technically.
Yeah, I mean, there's other ones, but I guess like what I mean is Q is less of this like consistent judge of humanity, and more so he kind of becomes just this wacky presence that we occasionally encounter that occasionally has a deeper philosophical context to what he's doing. So like it's not like the entire series Q is constantly judging what they're doing when that's the primary purpose in the first 2 episodes. Whereas here, everything that we see, we know where it goes later on. Nothing feels unintentional. You know, Quark's interactions with his nephew and Sisko, those are the things that carry over. Odo's interactions with Kira, those are things that carry over. It's really, they knew what they were doing, they knew what they wanted to do very early on with at least the core of the series. Whereas with TNG, I think most people would agree the first 2 seasons floundered a little bit with some good episodes and then picked up. I think they knew exactly what they wanted to do with this. And turning this back to this episode, this, I think you said it perfectly. This is kind of what this series is going to be about. It's not all going to be super bombastic episodes about, you know, the prophets and the conflicts between like all these different factions. It's sometimes just a much more of a character focused one that ties into greater conflicts, but is not like, it's not like super amazing. It's a B-, it's good, but don't expect masterpieces every episode, right? I don't think that would be fair. And we're gonna get some get some pretty bad episodes in this season. But I think ultimately this is a pretty good. If I was to tell someone to watch an episode of DS9 and I don't tell them to start from the start, I'd probably say something like this so they don't get an unfair perspective of the series.
Yeah.
I wouldn't tell them. Prologue. I wouldn't tell them in the Pale Moonlight because that's like the best episode of Star Trek overall and would really taint their perspective of the series. But if I was just like, just watch this to see if you like this. It's like, this is pretty decently like emblematic of what you're gonna get, but in terms of quality and consistency. So we could probably start. Let's see. I need to be able to move through the episode. So here we go. Now we start off with the greatest interaction between 2 characters. It starts off with Bashir just having like lunch in the cafeteria.
Yeah, in the Replomat, yeah.
Yeah, Replomat, where I guess everyone... I'm just going to call it the cafeteria, because, it's a Replomat, where they just have a bunch of replicators, I guess, just sitting there.
Yeah, like, ready to go, fire up some food, which...
Yeah, and we have, we see Bashir there, he's just enjoying, I guess, a breakfast, and suddenly, a Cardassian walks up to him. There's a Cardassian on the station, isn't that weird?
Yeah, a Cardassian on a station owned by a people who should fucking hate him, while also run by... a government that is definitely leery of Cardassians being in their territory of like, oh boy, you're gonna be a problem, aren't you?
Yeah, it's definitely the fact that there's one here, and we'll do a little bit of an introduction to Garrick because we get more of a description of it later on. He's on this station. He's not part of Cardassia. We kind of later learn he is banished. Yeah. And he's a tailor. He's a tailor. He's just a tailor. Plain simple Garrick is just a tailor. And he is, everything he says in this scene is just very, like, he's like double speaking to Bashir the whole time.
Yeah, it's like, immediately, like, even if you're not familiar with Garrick, like, the way he talks should, like, ping some flags for you of, like, wait a second, this is like...
This guy's not just a tailor.
Yeah, like, how to explain it. So we talked about Ducat last episode, how Ducat was like double speaking to Sisko, and Sisko was doing it back, but that seems to be the norm for Cardassians who are actually good Cardassians. Like they talk like on 2 layers at the same time, if not more. To just
I think that's a fair assessment to say about the Cardassians we see. Maybe not all Cardassians.
Yeah, like the ones who are actually like going to rise to the top, which
Well,
would
yeah,
be
and
the
that keys you
Ducat
in
Square.
onto why is this Taylor speaking the same way as a effectively captain in the Cardassian army speaking? There's something about this
Yeah.
guy that is very much on the same level as Ducat. And it's just funny because Bashir is just like starstruck and stunned silent the entire conversation.
Yeah,
He's like,
which if it
I
was
have his
just
expression
Taylor,
pulled up like at like 10 seconds in, and he's just like staring up, very scared at Bashir, or not. I'm sorry, at Garrick, and Garrick actually like moved around to circle from behind him. He actually like
yeah,
walks around him to circle behind him and basically like corner him.
yeah, it's like he comes up as a surprise, and like Bashir initially sees the movement. He raises his eyes from his drink after he took a sip, is like turning his head, but Garrick is already moving around, and
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's just he
circling him,
puts, yeah, he's
and
basically
and
like
then it's
a
giving him this
vulture.
beautiful smile. I have it pulled up. He's just giving a nice little smile. He's just a nice guy. Hi, I'm Garrick. Nice to meet you.
Kardashian by birth, obviously. Yeah. Uh, yeah, it's like, we got into the like body, like the power politics of the body in the last episode with Cisco and Picard, and that was almost like just not even intended between them, but that's just how it ended up being. While here with Garrick, it's like he planned how he would approach this,
Yeah,
just to
and
have the upper hand.
I find it very interesting that basically Garrick is very much pointing out the obvious. He knows how he is perceived on the station. He's not hiding it.
Mhm.
He's very direct. He says,
Right.
"I know how I'm seen on this station. I know that you're intimidated." He's saying all these things, and it only throws Bashir off more because
Yeah.
what we kind of later learn is Bashir views this guy as everyone. People kind of colloquially call him the spy because people think Cardassians left him here as a spy. So the fact that he is so direct is even more scary, which highlights that Garrick obviously knows how he's perceived. He knows how people are
Yeah.
looking at him, and he's intentionally. You could argue that he's trying to keep people on the back foot. I argue he's fucking with them.
Oh yeah, he's fucking with him,
It's
because
his little known joy in life that he gets to fuck with people who think he's more of a threat than he currently is.
yeah, like, well, it also fits just how he views lying and such, because it comes up later in the series, but at one point Bashir tells him the story of the boy who cried wolf, and it's like Bashir's point was, oh, it should teach you that you shouldn't lie all the time, or else no one would ever believe you. While Garrick's like, no, no, no. The lesson is that you should never tell the same lie twice. Garrick does not like this. This might just be Garrick in what he is, or it might just be the Cardassians and how their society is. But to Garrick, everything is like in furtherance of this lie, even if what he says is the truth. And like it's a lie that achieves whatever goals he has in mind. And this episode sets up, not this episode, the scene sets up that up of like, oh, Garrick is somebody who is at ease manipulating other people and turning like their expectations of him into advantages. Plus, it's just fun to fuck with him.
Yeah, and
It's just fun to fuck
I
with
think we discussed this when we watched the scene, although it's kind of countered in a later scene. But we basically, last episode we kind of talked about how Bashir is probably the most naive character on the station right now, or of the
him.
cast that we know. And Garrick approaches him. So this sort of presents it as if it is Garrick like targeting in on what could be the weakest link in the command chain, getting his in.
Mhm.
And we later learned that he's kind of approached everybody, but we only see him talk to Bashir, which I think is important to note because we have one of the most duplicitous characters talking to, at this point, one of the most naive characters. And
Right.
both of these characters, like, Bashir goes on an arc that is directly a result of his interactions and friendship with Garrick going forward. So
Yep.
I think this is a very important scene to sort of just show. And not much is actually said during the scene. I remember like watching it and thinking like, yeah, we don't actually get too much in terms of what these characters, like what Garrick is trying to say. It's really just an introduction. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's an interesting scene to kind of just introduce this character because he is going to play a role in this episode. So they needed to introduce him.
I mean, there is something that's said about Bashir by Garrick, where he's like, an open mind, the essence of intellect, and that's what Bashir is. Beyond just being naive, he's open to anything because at this point, he's naive, but he's also enthusiastic, optimistic. And as you said, the character arc, over time, that kind of gets washed away to like more hardened, just well, he's willing to push to anything, push to achieve his goals. Like eventually, he runs up into situations where it's like there are lines that he realizes that he wouldn't cross, that others have crossed, to be what are effectively, if we're just looking from a pragmatic, what's good for the Federation, they're right, but from a morality, ethical standpoint, it's wrong.
Yeah, and
Like,
to cap out this scene, Garrick basically walks around Bashir and puts his hands on his shoulders in a very and you see how scared Bashir is because I think he thinks he's gonna get his neck snapped or something.
which
And
would just be like, it'd be too obvious in public. Come on,
well,
like,
again, Bashir's just he looks absolutely terrified, and Garrick just ends this with, "I'm so glad to have made a new friend today," and it's just. It's funny because again it's like Garrick manipulating him. It's like, I'm going to call you my friend even though we literally just met 10 seconds ago.
very predatory, very predatory. Just
Well,
like,
I think it's interesting because our perspective at this point of the Cardassians is they're kind of bad guys. We don't really have a
yeah,
good example of a good person Cardassian. We don't really have any and obviously this series is going to recontextualize a lot of that, but or
mhm,
not recontextualize, but at least give it more depth. And
mhm.
so our perspective of this character, of this Cardassian character, is he's going to be a bad guy, which is weird because he ends up helping the good guys this episode.
Yeah,
So
but
I think it's just
as we'll see,
yeah, it's a little
it's
bit
not
more.
for good motivations.
No, he has his own reasons. He always has his own reasons. I would honestly, if it's not Cisco, my favorite character is probably Garrick.
Yeah.
Everything he
Yeah.
says is just I'm pretty sure if you gathered all of his speaking lines in the series and judged them, you could tell that there's a lot more attention. There's a lot more attention given to his dialogue than probably some other characters. Not that other characters
Yeah.
necessarily bad, but just I think they knew this character needed to have a high level of, like you said, double speaking dialogue. He needed to be someone who simultaneously you could listen to what he says and know there's something else there, but you couldn't tell exactly what it was. And that's what the scene does. He comes here just talking to Bashir. You think this scene's going to result in more, but really just kind of results in Garrick claiming Bashir is now his friend. And you're not really sure what to think of this. It introduces Garrick, but it also establishes these two's relationship going forward. And ultimately, I think it puts Garrick in this state of, what are we supposed to do with him? It puts in the audience's mind that this guy is someone to follow and pay attention to.
Yeah. Because whatever he's doing is somehow affecting, like, if he's brought up in an episode, it's like he's going to, like, more than anybody affect how it turns out, because he's the one who's the most in the know on dirty secrets and such and how to get what he
Yeah, and
wants.
an advantage of that is he's not. I don't know if he's definitely a main character, but he's kind of more of a B-lister on the series. And by that, I kind of just
Mhm.
mean there's a lot of episodes he's just not included in or even addressed. Cisco
Yeah,
is more
because
or
it's
less in
not.
every episode, unless it's specifically focusing on one character episode. Kira in most episodes, Odo, Bashir, Jedzi, these characters might have episodes they're not in if it doesn't involve them, but for the most part, there's a
Mhm.
reason they're not involved because that's the command crew. If they're not involved in a situation, there has to be a reason for it.
Yeah.
Whereas with Garrick, because he's not part of the command crew, they don't have to give a reason for why he's not participating in an episode. So he's not always addressed. His presence is not always accounted
Taylor,
for.
he's busy.
Yeah, he's doing his
He's
own thing. He's tailoring. He's just a tailor. He's plain simple Garrick.
he's fabricating some new dresses together.
Yeah, that's another thing. How does tailoring, I guess, work in Star Trek? Because I'd imagine you could just get the computer to somehow take your measurements and produce clothing.
So it's a case of this is getting, like, you need matter to create these things. Apparently, it's basically
You
transmutation.
also do
Let's
need
not
to
get into
scan
that.
things, technically. So
Yeah. So in certain cases, it's just better, like, oh, this needs to be changed. Okay, I can either make a whole new one, which takes of my allocation for what I can make, or I can just tailor it and use my actual
there
physical
are
skills
matter
to do it.
reclamators, I believe, in Star Trek.
Well,
You-
yeah. Well, yeah, but you need energy and matter to do that.
yeah,
But another thing is, I think the think about him being a tailor is actually kind of like on the nose, because so he works with fabric. He's making alterations to fit whatever his uh use is in the moment. He's fabricating whatever truth needs to be made with
yeah. I
his
mean,
design.
I'd imagine that's something intentional, or maybe they just gave him the job. That's one of them. I don't think you'd expect your tailor to be, you know, a
Spy.
duplicitous spy. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's supposed to be just almost a silly job, right? He's not like he's a bartender. He's not. He's like, oh, I'm a tailor. I
It's
deal with fabrics all day.
yeah.
And
It's not the one that you would think would hear secrets and dirty little troops about
well,
the
yeah,
station.
you almost write off the job as being kind of, I don't know what you do, just like disarming. I mean,
Mundane.
that could be the intention of it. He's a tailor. It's disarming that he's just a tailor. So
Mhm.
I think that's kind of interesting, but I don't know. Like, I think it could also just be he's a tailor because he I don't know if he likes it. I think he's okay with the job. But in the Star Trek universe, since it's more or less post scarcity, no one needs a job. You're just gonna do what you kind
Mhm.
of want to do.
Yeah.
I just find tailoring a little bit interesting in terms of the amount of work you'd actually end up doing in your life. I don't know.
Well, you're
Maybe he's just not very busy. I don't know.
I think in his case, I think in the case of Star Trek, like with what's said later, I think the idea of like fashion designers and tailors have really just once again merged because it's like, oh, there's a difference between tailoring and making alterations to suit as needed, and like being a fashion designer pushing trends.
Yeah,
But uh, later on we do hear like mentions of Garrick like doing his own designs and such, and it's like, yeah, I think to some extent, the artistic side of working with clothing has once again merged with the practical side
yeah.
because
Because again,
that's
you need to
really
scan. You
all
need
of
to
it.
scan things. Compete.
Yeah.
I mean, DS9, TNG, and really kind of like blew the lid over like technology in terms of what it could do. Sometimes
Hmm.
replicators could make ridiculous sorts of things, and I think later, like both DS9 and Voyager, kind of scale that back a little bit. Like put
Yeah.
a little bit more limitations on the technology. Voyager basically says replicators cost like a ridiculous amount of energy, which okay, sure. I wouldn't imagine it does more than the holodeck, but apparently that in Voyager that's the case. But I guess the
Yeah.
issue is more in with I guess like yeah. So here it's you just seem to need to be able to scan something and put it in. So he would need to make a
Hmm.
dress, scan it, and then he just has an infinite the ability to infinitely replicate that dress.
Hmm.
I suppose. I guess that's how it would
I
work.
suppose.
That's fine. It's probably not never a good idea to just start debating the technology of Star Trek. We can move on to the
But
next scene.
so yeah.
So
Mm.
Bashir immediately goes running towards the bridge. He runs on top, like he's basically telling everyone, "You won't believe it. The spy, he was talking to me. I met him in the Replimat.
Yeah.
Garrick, the Cardassian. We don't know. Garrick's a
With
spy, Doctor."
with how excited he is, like how he comes up in the elevator and there's that open front to it, and you see the ops before you can step up. Like with how excited he is, I wouldn't have been surprised if he was like climbing out of it. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like
I'm getting a picture of it.
as
He does actually do that. He before it
he
actually gets to the
jumps a
floor,
little bit.
he does a little hop. He does a little hop. But
You
he's very clearly super excited to tell everybody, guys, the spy approached me. And then O'Brien's the first one to mention, like, we don't know he's a spy.
yeah.
But he's so
Uh,
interested in telling them, it's like, isn't it interesting that he approached me? And everyone just seems kind of like non-interested. Like they're all so like, yeah, we get that. And this is where I think we kind of concluded Garrick has probably approached all of them at some point.
yeah. Except for maybe O'Brien, because you're like, well, he's just like, he's not officer. How much is he in? With me being like, well, he's
Well, yeah,
still the chief of.
we don't
Yeah,
know. It could also just be again. I still kind of like the idea that he approached Bashir because he views Bashir as the most naive.
yeah. Which
But
he
it
is.
seems as if let's see here. He introduced himself and struck up a conversation. Let's see. They are somewhat interested in terms of like what do you think he wants, and Bashir just doesn't have an answer because we don't have an answer as the viewers. I don't know what he wants. He's like, do you think he wants Federation medical secrets? Which is just like,
No, Bashir.
oh, Bashir. It is funny because I think this is part of Bashir viewing himself with a little bit of an inflated sense of self-importance.
Hmm.
You have a character who, he's just the doctor, right? He's not necessarily tactical. He's not engineering. He's the medical guy, which no offense would probably be the least like in terms of information if he was a spy to pass on to Cardassia.
Hmm.
Medicine is probably the least like concerning.
Yeah.
You'd be more interested in like the engineering like engineering upgrades to the station or the tactical plans of the command. You wouldn't be interested in the medical secrets, if anything. I do then love is like, you think he's after Federation medical secrets? They're safe with me, Commander. And Cisco just sort of entertains it, like, I'm sure they are. Like, yeah, okay.
I'm,
Like, he doesn't dismiss him, and he's just like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm sure
okay,
everything's fine,
buddy.
buddy. Let's see.
He's a
Oh,
special child.
then Bashir's just like, you should place a monitoring device on me. It's just like he's so
He
concerned about like being approached by the spy, and he's giddy about being approached by the spy, despite the fact that he was terrified when Garrick approached him. He's like, "Oh my god, this is exciting!"
Oh, dear Lord.
Everyone's like kind of giving it a smile. Do we have a canon age for Bashir compared to everyone else? Oh, we do. He's 27.
I think.
Well, remember in
hang on.
Emissary they mention, Cisco mentions that he's a bit young for you, and Jadzia mentions he's 27, and I'm technically 28.
Yeah, he's turning 28 this year in the series because it's 2369. He was born in 2341, so yeah, 27 at the moment.
Yeah, so
Or
he's a pretty young guy. I mean, he's especially because his entire life has basically been Starfleet Academy and then Starfleet Medical, so he's not exactly worldly.
No, I think Starfleet Medical. I think medical. You don't technically have to go through the. Oh no. Okay. So basically, you do them at the same time. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. It might take you longer to do both, but then plot hits. Also,
Plot.
I'm noticing that my notes on this episode are very poor, which is bad because we watched this episode a while ago. But we have a craft comes flying in. It's being chased by a Cardassian ship, and the smaller craft is taking evasive actions.
Mm-hmm.
It's very concerning because it's like, well, the Cardassian ship is basically entering Bajoran space in pursuing this ship, which is a clear violation of their treaty because they're doing it without, I guess, announcing anything.
Yeah, like there's no explanation. For all we know, this is like just a civilian vessel or something.
No, they do confirm. They confirm at one point it is a Bajoran ship in Bajoran space.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty bad look for the Cardassians.
Yep.
Let's see. The Cardassian vessel. Let's see. Yeah, they call him saying you're violating Bajoran space. Break off pursuit. The Cardassians are not even talking to them. Let's see. Oh yeah, then they call the vessel that's running, and they don't have video. They only have audio, which is I guess interesting. I don't know why that's necessarily a thing for the show. Maybe they just didn't want the video, but their goal is we're just going because the little vessel is about to be destroyed. They just warp them onto the station. Let's see. Yeah, the ship's exploding and they're warping the person here, and it turns out it is a freedom fighter from Bajor. Former freedom fighter, I suppose we would say at this point. Although we kind of know what's going to happen. Let's see. Oh, he does know Kira. His name is Tana Loss. He's requesting political asylum. He recognizes Kira. Kira recognizes him. And that's the intro. So, clearly this guy is being attacked by Cardassians. As we know up until this point, the Cardassians are the bad guys against Bajorans. We don't know what this guy's doing, but clearly he pissed them off.
Yeah.
And he knows Kira, which again, it is a Kira-focused episode. It's mentioned that then after the intro sequence, Kira mentions that she and Tana, fought together in the underground. She has a lot of respect for the guy. He's brother in arms sort of deal. He's also injured, so he's put unconscious at the moment. I guess he's getting medical attention. And go on.
So I think you skipped where the Cardassian officer calls in.
No, they're doing that right now. They're like doing that. Cisco is basically telling them we've given him political asylum. The Cardassians are like, you're harboring a known criminal. And again, this kind of creates that interesting circumstance where after a war has been decided, who decides where the criminals lie? It's like, ugh, it's very uncomfortable, especially because I guess I wouldn't say there's a definitive victor in the war like with Cardassia or in the battle like in the conflict with Cardassia. It's sort of like we had a treaty where you got some territory, we got some territory. Bajor just happens to be part of the territory we got. So there's just there's that always ongoing question of what defines a political a war criminal, a political asylum seeker. Some of these people probably did, and we're gonna later learn people on both sides did very horrible things to one another. And and it's only it's only gonna get more tense. And because there's not a definitive winner, you can't really enforce your will on the other side. It's very much a hotbed of drama possible. But Cisco basically says we are going to hold this person, we're gonna hold him, and we're not gonna give him to you. I'm gonna evaluate if he's a threat, if he's needs to be turned in, or if he needs to be brought over to the Federation. What's happening? Kieran does not seem too happy with this because Cisco's essentially entertaining the idea of turning this guy over. The
Yeah.
Cardassians inform him that he's committed some heinous crimes against the Cardassian people, not just the Cardassian government, the Cardassian people.
Well, he also dropped the name of what Tanalos is. He's Koma, and he says not even the Bajorans would not grant his kind asylum. It's whatever he did has gone beyond what Kira seemed to have done, because Kira, is a major now in the Bajoran militia, and that's pretty respected. And that brings up the question of what exactly did the Koma do that even the Bajorans would be like, we don't want to touch that?
Well, and Kira's actually pretty young, so when the conflict was going on, she was mostly a child. She was mostly like a teenager when she was fighting. So this guy, maybe he's older. I don't think we have an exact age for him. Mm-hmm. But it could have been that Kira would have gone down that path had she been old enough to. Mm-hmm. I do like that Cisco offers the Cardassians the ability to dock the ship while they're discussing this matter. I think that's neat. There's this. Yeah. He's definitely trying to maintain the diplomacy in this obviously difficult circumstance, and I think we're going to get to the major conflict of this episode where Kira has a very definitive idea of what is right in this circumstance, whereas Cisco is playing the Federation neutral party right now. He's saying, I don't know all the facts. I'm going to evaluate it and I will make a decision later. Meanwhile, Kira's like, no, this is a Bajoran freedom fighter. You can't turn him over. And that's going to be a lot of the conflict of the episode.
Yeah.
And I think it's nice to see. It's nice to see Cisco playing a little bit of the diplomat. He understands the circumstance he's in. He's not trying to piss off the Cardassians. He's not trying to piss off the Bajorans. He's just trying to make a decision. And I think we'll get to it. We'll discuss it near the end. But I do think there is a bit of a conflict between how Kira should be viewing this circumstance, if you recall what we were talking about.
I think I do.
With Cisco being the emissary.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But let's see. The Cardassians basically said we made no threat to your facility, so you shouldn't treat us as if we did. Hold on. What is a? Oh yeah. So Cisco's like, I'd like an explanation for violating Bajoran space and threatening the Federation facility. The guy's like, we've made no threat to your facility, and Cisco's just like, I stand corrected. Cisco out. And I find that very fun, mostly because it's this element of Cisco is basically acknowledging we are fully aware that you are willing to threaten this facility, even if you haven't yet. Mm-hmm. It's basically calling him out, because what he did essentially did put the entering this space without warning or anything like that is essentially a threat to all military positions. Mm-hmm. So to basically call him out and say, you made it, you put us in danger, and he's like, we made no threat to you. It's like, oh, I stand corrected. It's that double speak. It's that I'm watching you for what you're about to do. Make sure that you don't threaten this facility.
Yeah. Well, also it'd be like if I did threaten you, you would know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice little interaction again between this. Let's see.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're inviting the Cardassians on, and oh yeah, Cisco's basically like, oh yeah, make sure their docking procedures take them a while.
Oh, don't you love bureaucracy when it actually works out in your favor?
Well, I mean, it's basically Cisco manipulating the bureaucracy. Like, look, do 30 different checks for all the weird space diseases that probably exist that we don't want on this station.
Yeah, actually enforce that.
I do really we actually see in a later episode a very similar thing about all these just long docking procedures where they have to, take into consideration the state of someone's ship. Where have you been? What have you done? What are you carrying? It's very classic stuff that they could have overlooked, but it adds a nice little bit of character and sort of military discussion. Where this is a military installation. You can't just have any ship dock. It's a military installation and trading outpost and outpost of commerce and other sorts of small
procedures for everyone to be safe and take advantage of it properly.
Well, yeah, and it makes it feel a lot more real. It makes it feel like this is not just a Also, I guess I find it interesting because with TNG, pretty much everyone who came on the station was always through a transporter, or the ship was always through a transporter. And transporters can scan for those sorts of diseases and filter them out. They don't work all the time, but they can do that. Here, people actually dock their ships onto the station and physically walk onto the ship. So there's an element of you could be carrying diseases that we're not scanning with our or filtering out with a transporter.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's another question of like I guess they again more in the sense of DS9 limiting technology is they don't just use the transporter willy nilly. You know
Yeah,
that's energy that you don't really need. Presuming that it
yeah,
takes more
because
energy to it takes more energy to transport someone than to dock a whole ship. It obviously is going to take energy to dock a whole ship and like pressurize a docking bay or something like that. But
Mhm.
presumably the transporter is a lot more power.
Yeah, and you also want to be able to control where they're going on the station and such.
Yeah,
Like,
there's that element of if you because we see it in later episodes when a ship is docked, it's locked into the station, which means the station has to willingly let it go. There could be a
mhm.
circumstance where they're like, "We're not letting you leave, and we're not letting your ship go, buddy."
Yeah,
So
that
you can
does
do that.
come up. That it's basically like a way to like enforce like a safe, orderly environment. Like, hey, you have to do this procedure. Go through it. We we're not dropping shields, so you can teleport in. You've got to dock. You've got to come like the old meat space way. You've
Yeah,
got to walk.
I do find it very interesting. So then we're gonna have let's see, Cisco and Kira arguing about the loyalty of the terrorist group. So Cisco's obviously trying to get information about what Konma is. Let's see.
Hmm.
Just, yeah, we learned about the Konma, how it's like viewed with contempt. They didn't. Hold on. Let's
Yeah.
see. Didn't they? Oh yeah, the Konma apparently assassinated one of the first ministers last month.
Yes, which I'm trying to remember what the first minister technically is because I could have sworn the last time I heard it, it's what the equivalent of a prime minister of the planet would be, but it seems like since they say like one of, it's like does that mean it's multiple? But that doesn't make.
Well,
I think this
it's
is one of those.
it's a whole planet, so maybe there's different provinces have different first ministers, and I don't know.
I suppose, yeah. Uh, Yeah, and maybe that's it because, like the one for Beijing is supposed to be the main dude of the Chamber of Ministers.
Yeah.
The main bot
I mean,
owner.
we'll
So
get more
yeah,
on that later. I don't think we have much of it now. It sounds like a big thing that's like okay. And here's something I find interesting. I was just watching part of the scene. So Cisco's asking, so what do you think about him? Is he Konma? And Kira basically like rolls her eyes and it's yes, but and Cisco just immediately grabs her arm and pulls her into like an alcove to talk to her because this is a big deal.
yeah. This is
Like
someone
he essentially
who
just granted political asylum and stood up for this guy against the Cardassians. And Kira basically just admitted, oh yeah, by the way, he is part
it's
of a
the
terrorist
equivalent of
group.
yeah. It's like Irish history. You know how like a lot of the IRA units agree to the like settlements and such and like disarming, but there are still groups who have not and they're still militant.
Of course.
That's what yeah, that's what Koma basically is. They're the ones who are not satisfied with the status quo for whatever reason, whether that's like, oh, like in the case of like like various forms of IRA, the ones who haven't, are usually like revolutionary socialists or communists.
Yeah.
While in this case, um, it's something that'll come up throughout these early seasons of oh, like these are the guys who don't want even the Federation to be here. They want Bajor just for the Bajorans.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of like the first sign of like, you know, even though they're free, they see the Federation here having control over the station as still just occupation by another name because
Yeah.
they remember how the first occupation happened,
Well,
where they
and
came in.
we saw, remember Kira last episode where she admits if the Federation wasn't here, it would mean civil war. And this is kind of part of that is you're going to have some of these organizations that are far more extremist than others who
Mhm.
are willing to do dangerous things if it means, furthering their goals. And, you know, Cisco basically pulls Kira aside, says, get your priorities straight. He kind of recognizes that she's in a bit of a conflict here and there's a nature of loyalty like he's talking about loyalty. Let's see. Try to see. Let's see. Yeah, he has basically no room for divided loyalties. uh, she admits that her priorities are straight, which obviously there's a double meaning to that. That could mean she's willing to side with the Federation and the provisional government, or she's willing to side with her people, however she views that.
Well, as she says, like, let's not
Yeah,
be confused here. My loyalties are to Bajor, and Bajor needs men like Tonalo. She thinks this guy, like, this isn't a case of double meaning. This is like she's out, like, actually was last episode. She's clear, like, my loyalties are to Bajor, and I'm going to do what's good for Bajor.
yeah. I
In
mean,
this
I
case,
guess like there's a double meaning there in the sense of my loyalties are clear, but when you look at it, you can see that her loyalties really are not clear. What does loyalty to Bajor mean? Like we just heard about how the Tana Lo's organization, the Khon Mod, just killed one of the first ministers. You know, how can you stand with an organization that kills one of the ministers of your planet if you know if your loyalties are clear? It's like I don't think your loyalties are clear. I think you're very not even what you have loyalty in is clear because she says it's to Bajor, but what does that mean in this context? And I also think like the way Cisco was asking it is, you know, he wants because she's part of his command staff, so
right.
she also technically has loyalty to the Federation and Cisco in this context. You know, she's been given the rank, this position, and stuff like that for the purposes of facilitating this agreement. She owes a duty of loyalty, to a sense, to Federation and Cisco, but you know, she's clearly putting Bajor first. Oh God, what did you just send?
Sorry everyone. I sent him an image of like I think from a comic with Cisco as a character, and he's in like I think a later uniform and such. But it's like he's between these pairs of hands with this blue glow behind him. I just saw it while I was like checking things. And I just like I had to send this. It's so weird.
I can't even get
It's
it because it would screw up all my Discord stuff. I gotta figure out how to do that.
you do need to do that. But yeah, if anyone's curious, just go on Memory Beta and look up Cisco there, and it's like the image that's in like the info card thing. It's such a weird image because it's from nothing in DS9 itself. I think it's from like one of the comics based on how the art looks. Because it doesn't match anything you would see on like a Star Trek novel cover. You know what I mean?
Oh, I
Uh,
can't get it up. It's silly. I'm just gonna pull it up. There it is. That's a very silly looking image.
yeah, I have no. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a comic
There,
because I'm
and
looking at
fade
the
over.
name of the
Oh,
image and
there
it
it
says
is. Look
IDW,
at the boy.
so it has yeah the boy like so it has to if it's IDW it's like oh that's one of the comic book publishers so yeah sorry everyone I had to like send that to him
It,
I'm
it, it,
sorry.
it, it's a weird looking picture. I'm not gonna lie, but again, it's just putting people in comic book stuff is sometimes funny. Back
Yeah.
on the point, I think this is a very nice conversation between these two, and I think we'll get into the little bit of the nitty gritty about what I think is kind of an issue with this episode.
Hmm.
Kira is her faith is very important to her. Cisco has been
And
dubbed
this
the
is the
emissary.
emissary. Yeah.
So we don't entirely know what this means in terms of the story as a whole, but the emissary is more or less like their Jesus equivalent. He is their voice to the gods.
Yeah.
So this is very she's essentially arguing with someone who like 2 weeks ago was dubbed Jesus, and she is arguing with him when I'm not gonna lie, her view of the situation should be very different. She should be probably like we do kind of get some of this later on where Kira kind of admits to how she views Cisco, and Cisco's almost uncomfortable with that because he's not really
Yeah.
comfortable with his position as the emissary yet. But in this episode, Kira should be really conflicted because on one hand, you have the person who's basically your Jesus not immediately siding with the Bajoran. You know,
Hmm.
so it's she should almost feel a little bit betrayed here. This idea that you're supposed to be our emissary, you're supposed to be our Jesus. Why are you entertaining the idea of giving this guy over to the Cardassians? That's the last thing you should do. But she's not. But that never comes up. It's kind of just.
Yeah.
It's not really addressed. It's kind of an issue, especially because it's a big deal in the first episode that Kira's religion is important to her, and Cisco is the emissary of the prophets. These are. We don't really get the full context of how important this is till later on, but these are plot elements that are introduced, and as a result, this scene feels a little bit like it's missing something.
Yeah. I think she. Yeah, I was gonna say like, oh, maybe she's still in that mindset of the resistance, but it's still like, no, she would still bring that up.
Well,
Uh,
what it really should be is her entire conflict should be trying to rationalize Cisco's point of view with her view of Cisco.
mhm.
Because again, Cisco's playing the diplomat here. He's trying not to create conflict between Bajor and Cardassia, and she's all about, you know, my loyalties are to Bajor. But that it would include your people's emissary. That would include, this guy who, even though he's Tonma, he is Konma. Even though he's Konma, he's still a Bajoran. And there is a non-zero chance that Cisco is going to turn this man over to the Cardassians, which would just be horrible as far as she's concerned. But it would come from a decision that comes from her version of Jesus Christ, essentially.
Yeah.
So this should be something that's like a huge internal conflict for her. But she seems, like you said, her loyalties are clear. As far as she's concerned, her mind is made up.
Right.
So it's a bit interesting. I feel like that should come up. Like, she should almost mention, you're the emissary. How can you even entertain the idea of siding with the Cardassians? And Cisco's like, I'm not your emissary. I'm a member of the Federation. Like, he's still fighting against that role. And we know that he later embraces it more. But at the moment, it's still very much like, I don't even know what that means. I'm just going to do my job.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's something that I feel like this episode is lacking and should honestly be included. I think that's ended up why I ended up giving it a B-, is because it's like, this is important and all the elements are there. It's not like with Garrick, where we don't know a lot about Garrick yet. And there might be some things you can say, oh, that doesn't make sense with what we understand for later Garrick. I don't think there was anything in that one scene we had of him yet. But the point being is, we don't actually know that information about Garrick yet. Here, all the pieces have been provided to us. They're just not being used.
Right.
Which, unfortunately, that's kind of the more Star Trek element, where it's like, the new episodes don't really address too much of previous series. Now, fortunately, DS9 is better at that than most. But even it is not infallible in terms of not really addressing all the different plot lines that you should be addressing.
It's a step in the right direction for continuity as a series as a whole, but there's still some hiccups, because this is like one of the first shows to really do continuity.
Yeah.
At the same time, and it's not, I hate to bring up another series, especially since I haven't given it a full watch yet. But Babylon 5, people, these two were going on at the same time, and Babylon 5 was really focused on continuity, and it had the benefit of not having the Star Trek baggage of how is the Star Trek thing written, and meanwhile DS9 has to basically have that fight of the soul in a way of what are we going to be? Are we just going to be, Star Trek but in Frontier Town, or are we going to really work with the continuity here and keep it going?
I think it's probably a big way to address that. Yeah, I mean, there's also the element of, I don't know the production schedule this year. They're doing 22 episodes a season. That's a lot of content you have to do in a very short amount of time. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be flubs, and not all these scenes are necessarily shot in order. So you never know how these things go. But that's probably a little bit more to discuss near the end of the episode as we see how Kira interacts with some of the stuff. I do like that Kira makes a point that if you're ever to reunify Bajor, the way it should be is you're going to have to repatriotize these people, the people who are formerly major terrorists. You're going to need to show, if you have this major terrorist organization that still exists, and as far as they're concerned, if they ever turn themselves in, they're going to be put to death or they're going to be arrested. They're never going to turn themselves in.
Yeah. Right. You need to make allowances and be like, hey, listen,
what you did was horrible, but we need you to come back so that all your faction understands that we can be trusted and that we're looking for a unified Bajor. So I don't think, despite the fact that we know she's clearly arguing from her side as opposed to trying to look at this neutrally, Kira makes a lot of good points here. There's a lot of understanding that in the end of the day, if Cisco turns this man in, there's a lot of people on Bajor who are going to be alienated from the Federation.
Yeah,
that's nothing. This is really the first conflict between Bajor and the Cardassians that the Federation has to deal with, that we've seen.
Yeah, and this gets to I think this is again, I don't know how much we're going to talk about real world, how these things would work out, but this is kind of like a fundamental truth of how these conflicts need to end if they're going to actually end. You need to make these allowances. It might no one's going to be satisfied with how it's handled, but they're going to be able to live with it. And if you can't find a solution that everyone can live with, even if it pisses them off a little bit, you're never going to end the violence of it. And a lot of DS9, well, I don't know if a lot, but it's one of those things where just it comes up pretty regularly. There's some hard choices that have to be made, and this is the first one where the Federation has to make the hard choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best way of putting it. Federation's not in a good situation right now, and everyone's probably watching them to see what they'll do. Will they side with the Bajorans, or will they side with the Cardassians? He's obviously in a non-enviable position because it's his decision that'll probably ultimately lead to these sorts of things. Let's see, we get like the little medical scene. I don't think too much really comes up here other than they establish he, has injuries. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, they talk about some of his. Oh, apparently he's been tortured by the Cardassians.
Yeah.
So he was captured and tortured, and he has like scars that are like the Cardassians have a way of torturing you so that the scars don't heal properly or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, you have these like permanent marks on you.
Yep.
Kira basically is talking directly to him while Sisko's standing here, and she's like, yeah, Sisko hasn't decided whether to give you asylum yet. And Sisko basically, it's kind of interesting because Kira's essentially talking around Sisko, even though he's right there.
Yeah, and
Sisko wants information out of this guy, so he knows he has to play things close to the chest. She's immediately revealing everything that he wants to play close to the chest. So he basically says, maybe we should have this conversation alone, and dismisses her.
Yeah, and
It's just
like,
an extension of that conflict. As far as she's concerned, her mind is made up. This man needs asylum, and any decision that doesn't give him that is bad. So you could argue maybe she's trying to force Sisko's hand. Maybe she's trying to prep Tone Moss so he doesn't say anything stupid. But Sisko's really much not happy with it, and he understands. But he doesn't fight her on it. He basically says, I'm gonna have a conversation with this guy alone. I think Sisko understands that. I don't think he's condemning her point of view. I just think it's challenging for him to deal with.
Yeah, and I think she is trying to, in a way, force it, because right after this, we'll get the Kira, like, the scene with the Admiral. Like, is it fine if we go, because that kind of answer, like, oh, is she trying to force it?
Well, it's also more in the sense of, the last thing she wants is this guy admitting to something that will condemn him. So, by saying this, he hasn't decided to give you political asylum yet. It puts him on notice that he needs to be careful about what he says. And that's not what Sisko wanted.
Yeah, it basically sets it up of like, oh, great, now he's aware that I'm going to be,
he's going to be careful.
Interrogate.
He's going to be careful and not say something.
Yep. And then right afterwards, after Bashir's like he needs rest, and we cut away from the infirmary for a bit, immediately Kira's talking to a Starfleet admiral, which I guess makes sense since she's the liaison officer between Bajor and the Federation. It's just like, oh man, you got an admiral on real quick.
Well, we'll get to that scene in a second. So, what's his name again? It's like Tona. I can't recall.
Tana Los.
Tana Los.
Tana
okay.
is, yeah.
So, Sisko's basically asking him like, "What are you doing?" And he basically admits we're punishing them for crimes against us. As far as Tana Los is basically saying is like, look, we're well within our right to do this. But he's also admitted that, well, he says the Khon Ma is doing that, but he's had enough of the Khon Ma. He's done with them.
Yeah, he's basically come to, like, he's just tired of it.
Which, again, that puts Sisko in the awkward conversation of, like, look, if we want the rest of the Khon Ma to stop what they're doing, the best thing that we can do right now is to say, look, if you give that life up, we will repatriatize you. Repatriatize, is that the right term?
Repatriate.
Repatriate. Okay, repatriate. I don't know what repatriatize is, but you will get repatriated if you leave this group. That's kind of the issue here, and we see a lot of this. We see a lot of this sort of similar conflict extend to the Maquis later on in the series. It's the idea of another terrorist organization that, at the end of the day, what you want is these people to come back to the Federation.
Yeah,
but
because otherwise they're just going to keep fighting, and that's not good for you.
Yeah.
Because besides them just attacking you, like it's like, oh well, you're obviously supporting them because they're your people. It's like, no, we're not. Please stop saying. It's like we're trying to get them to stop too.
Yeah. So then we get the scene where Kira is already on the line with an admiral. She's saying that Sisko doesn't understand the issue. The admiral says we'll be in touch with the situation. Kira basically admits, like, all right, thank you. I don't think it's surprising she has direct contact with an admiral. Considering the circumstance, I'm sure the admiral probably has, like, priority one conversations with Sisko and Kira. Kira is the liaison to Bajor, so she probably has a direct line to this admiral in an emergency situation. Although, admittedly, again, I am wondering, I guess, how this is supposed to work out, because remember how we discussed the idea that I imagine how captains would actually function is they would basically be like in charge of sectors, and commanders would be in charge of like individual systems within those sectors.
Yeah,
So there
and
really should be like, is there not a captain you can talk to here? Because obviously Cisco's not a captain yet. So who is
he's a
his
commander.
direct supervisor? Like who is his direct like in command before the admiral? I guess there's just not a captain.
Yeah, it's never brought up. And another thing is, I don't think this admiral in particular is ever brought up again in the
I
series.
mean, you know,
I'm
I
looking
think
at
we get other admirals, but yeah.
well, yeah, but it's not like this is the one who handles it. It's
Well, they
let's
could have been
see.
transferred.
No. Oh, so yeah, no, she does come up one other time. In the episode Whispers, it's an O'Brien suffers episode, the one where he thinks there's a conspiracy.
Uh
I'm
huh.
sure you remember that one.
Yeah.
But those are the only two where it comes up. So yeah, maybe it's a case of she gets rotated out. aka they
I
can't
mean,
get the
yeah. I mean,
actress again.
I assume people get transfers all the time in terms of what they're in charge of, and they put someone else in charge. Like, for all we know, the admiral we generally deal with, I can't remember his name, but we'll get to him eventually. Maybe he's a captain right now, and he's going to be promoted to admiral, and then he takes over that position. But
Oh, are you talking about uh the one that Cisco becomes an ad like a assistant to eventually?
yeah,
Like yeah, Ross, that's his name.
yeah.
Yeah, he could be promoted or he's just like well, no, he only starts to come up when things go hot in the series. And so I think
Well,
in
yeah.
his
I just
case,
mean, whoever's in charge of this area right now, it's her apparently. But in all fairness, if she doesn't come up a lot, it could just be because they get a different admiral, or they didn't have that actor anymore. So they're like, yeah, the admirals, we shift their positions around every once in a while depending on our needs.
yeah.
It's not really a big deal, but we're kind of glossing over. So Kira very blatantly just goes over Cisco's head. Like,
Yeah.
this is another one of those circumstances where I feel her respect for the emissary should decide some of her decisions, but it doesn't. She really kind of just immediately goes over his head. She's not even necessarily being
He doesn't
careful
even bring
about
it
it. There
up.
was the scene in the medical room where she's, immediately undermines what he wants to do, and now she's immediately going to the admiral. She is very much like butting heads with Cisco this episode, and it's not inappropriate. Again, it's based on their character, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah.
Um, O'Brien's talking about how they're not the Cardassian system is the Cardassian ship is eventually docked. They took a very long time. Let's see. Cisco needs to do some research on the Con Ma. He needs to figure out what he's doing here. Oh,
Right.
this is where we get O'Brien's opinion on Cardassians. He admitted that he fought in the war against them. As an enlisted, he was probably boots on the ground for a lot of these conflicts. And
He was.
he has no
Yeah.
love for he has no love for Cardassians. He sympathizes with the Bajoran terrorists. He understands the circumstances they were in. It's nice because he understands that his captain needs to do research onto these terrorists, and he's trying to provide some insight based on his unique position. And I think Cisco does end up
Yeah.
respecting that. He's like, thank you for letting me know. The fact that O'Brien fought in this war is a very heavy part of his character we see going forward. But I do appreciate that he's offering advice to his captain based on his unique circumstance, even though he's obviously clearly underranked compared to his captain.
Yeah.
It's not even engineering his specialty, right? It's no, I fought in the war, so
Yeah.
like this is my
He's
perspective
the
on
closest
the
thing.
Cardassian people.
Yeah. This is the closest thing to at the moment a subject matter expert for Cisco, and Cisco, like as a good commanding officer should hears the voice here and like okay, yeah, thank you for providing that and helping with.
Well,
It's like,
it's also O'Brien offering the perspective you wouldn't want to turn any person over to them. You would not feel good about it.
yeah,
Because Cardassians are going to do terrible things to their prisoners, and
five blades.
I think it's very much an aspect of he understands the conflict Cisco's in, and he's not saying which way is right, but he's letting them know the consequences of one side of the decision, and the last thing I think Cisco would ever want to do is turn someone over for brutal torture, but he has to be made aware that that's the circumstance, and that's what O'Brien's doing. He's like, look, I'm not telling you which is the right answer or which is the wrong answer. Just understand the consequences of one of these answers is a pretty bad one. So I think it's something that's appreciated. Let's see. Let's see what.
And then we get Rollman calling Cisco. It's just like, and the fact he uses like his first name, and it's not even like the full first name, but his nickname,
Yeah.
Ben. Like just like And that Bajoran one, she's basically like, "Hey, so your Bajoran, your pet
Oh
Bajoran,
yeah,
just
and she interrupted a meeting.
yeah." Which, oh my lord, do not do that.
Oh my
Like,
god, like that. I mean, I guess props to the admiral for handling this with some level of care in that sense, where there's an element of, she's like, she listened to Kira, she took her advice, and now she's just immediately reporting back to the commander in charge and saying, "You need to get your people under control." But she didn't like, point it out to Kira, right? She didn't say, "You interrupted me during a meeting,"
right.
because I think she understands
Which
this is not my job to handle. I should not make it worse. Give it to Benjamin, see what he says, let him deal with
get
it.
him to fix. Yeah, which but I can imagine just how much hot shit this goes in right now because of like the interruption, even if it's not his fault, because like uh anyone who's young and hasn't really gone into a job where there's like organizational meetings, if your manager's in a meeting, don't interrupt that meeting unless it's dire. Okay, don't do that. Like
Nah,
it's
nah.
bad.
Power move it and chat it and just be like, walk in and demand a pay raise right there.
And see, that's that. You know what? All power to you, Holowix. But you're the one who doesn't give a shit about their job.
Hey,
Like, holy
I
fuck,
like my job, kind of. I like what I do in
kind
general.
of.
But anyway, so yeah, Cisco basically learns what Kira did. It's not good. He's very much like he's like apologized. Let's see, what does he exactly say?
It says yes, Admiral. Just like basically like he's got nothing he can say to make this better besides just like I'm going to do what you say. Like, yep,
Yeah. It would
just like
probably help if I got the DS9 episode scripts open so I didn't have to constantly go through these things.
oh my lord, he doesn't have to transcript people. He's not as good as me. Look at this
I
moron,
had my
this
notes, but
fool.
my notes were apparently bad.
Yeah, and you're supposed to be good at taking
I'm
notes.
also
Like,
recording the video. How?
meanwhile, me, I just rely on like my weird eidetic memory for DS9.
Yes, your weird
Uh,
eidetic memory. Let's see. We are.
uh, just Control F for Roman bracket on the on monitor, and just go down to the second instance of that.
Let's see.
Um,
This is a really bad script. What did I do with the script I had? I know I had like a thing where I got all the scripts from.
yeah, I have it right here. Here you go.
I got it. There we go. Okay, past prologue.
Yep.
And we are. That's
Uh,
cool.
look,
I see it. I
just
see it.
type.
I see it. I have it
She
open.
sees it.
I just got to get to the.
Yeah, just go Control F2 that Bajoran woman you have.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So Cisco just says yes, Admiral. It's a very short scene. It's not super in depth. Cisco doesn't make excuses. He just agrees. Again, nice sort of military decorum here. Your admiral's basically criticizing you for not having control of your people. All you can do is sort of say, "I'll fix it."
Yeah, it's like there's no room to really like argue this. Like this is because this is like the first like week or two of being here, and they're still getting things settled down, and it's like you know it's at least like there's the excuse of like it's early and he still has to figure this all out for like how to keep them in line. And when it's pointed out to him, it's not so much like you're going to be court-martialed for it. It's like, hey, please fix this. This
Yeah.
needs to be settled.
All right. So
You know.
then we have
Oh.
the infirmary scene with Tana and Kira.
Hmm.
So Tana's basically talking about Cisco, talking about like oh, I had never seen you wear that uniform. It's like, what do you think of the Cisco guy? You two don't get along. Kira's like oil and water. Let's see. I
Yeah.
mean, I do. I guess I find it again interesting. They don't really mention the fact that he's the emissary. These are two Bajorans that are essentially talking about like the embodiment of their Jesus, and neither of them talk about the
Yeah.
fact that like, oh yeah, by the way, this is our like the fact that Kira acknowledges that he and I do not get along is kind of a big deal considering he's supposed to be, a very important religious figure to you.
Yeah.
What does that say that you don't get along with your religious figure?
Yeah. It's one of those things of just like I think she's still coming to terms with it. and it's not factoring in as much because it's like, oh, it's brought up later on. This is an outsider who
Yeah,
is clearly not comfortable with their position, and it's like, well, and he doesn't himself bring it up. So it's like, how much should it factor into you? And in the case of Tana, there's the argument that could be made like, oh, he might have just escaped something, or he's been out of the loop, and he just got here and he doesn't know himself. So it's kind of forgivable on his end. Plus, we know he has a game. Like, we find out later he has a game for why he came here, and he brings up that game, namely saying, wearing that uniform, I thought maybe you'd forgotten. Bring up Kira's uniform,
yeah,
and like, is she still the Kira he knew,
yeah.
aka the one he can manipulate to get what he
And then
wants?
eventually he asks, "Do you think you'll give me over the Cardassians?" And she says, "Over my dead body." And he's like, "Yep, that's the Kira I knew, or I remember."
Yep.
So I mean, it's nice that he's basically trying to reaffirm his relationship with her, and that it's us against them almost, and only if you protect your people are you the old version of you. But I guess that creates this question of like, is the old version of Kira good?
I just realized there's a good dichotomy here between. So you know how the episode opened with the Garrick Bashir scene
Yeah.
and the naivete of uh Bashir, being the new guy.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, is naive in her own way of like thinking, like everything. How to put so she's obviously jaded and such, but she's naive to the idea that Hana might be using her, and and it's like we need people like this. While Cisco's like, as an outsider looking at it, and this is the one where it's like he's worried compared to Garrick, where it's like, oh, like Bashir knows that he could be getting played. I don't need to worry about that. Here with Kana, Cisco's like, this is a delicate matter where there's something at stake. It's like it's almost like I think that's part of the reason why they set up with that introduction to Garrick. Besides Garrick's part to play in the episode, just introducing him, it sort of sets up like there's sort of like Garrick comes out and just says not like I'm a spy, but he comes out and just says like I know how people think about me, but I'm here to be a friend. While Tana, he doesn't come out and say like he's like being crafty about it and be like, oh, are you still the Kira I know, that sort of thing. Like, I'm just noticing that now that we're talking about it. Sorry for
No,
going off the
no,
rail.
it's a good point because you have two characters who, I guess they have fundamentally different views on how they're supposed to help. Kira is someone who's
Hmm.
also fighting against her younger self in a way. Her younger self is a very different person. She never thought she'd be in
Hmm.
this position, and a lot of I think what Kira learns as part of her arc is that while the things she did during the war were necessary, they
They
were
can't keep
ultimately
going.
bad things to do. And like
Yeah.
when you look at some of the acts that she committed, she almost looks upon them with regret and understands I can't do that anymore. I need to be better. And
Hmm.
that I think that's a lot of her arc. And right now she's kind of struggling with that. She's looking at someone who represents who she used to be, the freedom fighter who would die for their cause, wouldn't even think about killing Cardassians if it meant saving Bajorans. But that's
Right.
not the world she lives in anymore, and that's not the best version of Kira that she can be. But
Yeah.
again, that's what she used to be. So she's fighting against that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost like she's hoping that it's like that, and she can, in this moment, help. Because what ultimately Hanalos does, like, it really just looks like us looking at it from outsider perspective. Despite him thinking it'll help Bajor, it's really just gonna hurt Bajor because it doesn't kill any Cardassians, but spiritually, it's a death sentence for Bajor because it's gonna, you know,
Yeah, I mean, we'll learn
it.
because after this scene, they play like suspicious music as Kira walks away, and like as the
Yeah,
guy
and
almost
he
like turns to face
rolls
the screen,
over.
it's like, "Ooh, suspicious music. What's going on?" We then get the scene with Goldenar and Cisco. So I'm not really a big fan of this argument. Like, there's some elements of Cisco playing the diplomat here, but Dinar is very much he's not Ducat. He's not doing this double speak. He's very much
He's
like,
just
I accept your apology, but not your explanation. Where's Tonalo? Like, and Cisco's like, yeah, I'm going to give him
yeah.
political asylum. It's like, he is a criminal. It's like, Cisco basically points out, both sides commit atrocities in war. And Goldenar is like, well, he's still going to commit these acts. And that's, the first hint that we really have about what is this guy up to. Cisco basically
Yeah.
is saying, like, my apologies. I'm going to probably, give him political asylum. I'm going to, like, listen to what the Federation has to say. probably end up handing him over to his provisional government. If you wish to pursue further acts against him, you are free to contact the provisional government and get their information, knowing that
Yeah.
the provisional government is probably less likely than the Federation to offer this guy up.
Yeah, and here's the thing. The reason why Goldenar isn't like that is, so our other two Cardassians we've really met. Well, there was a third one in the last episode, the one who is like commanding the
Yeah.
troops attacking the station. But it seems to be so Dukat. He was the former head of Terra Nor and the head of the occupation, and Garrick's a spy who worms his way into secrets that help the Cardassians. They're they're playing diplomatic political games like power politics, while Dinar and the other Cardassian we saw, they just see a problem that they need solved right now, and they know the way to do it, which is, hey, just give us the thing we want. Well, and here Dinar is like, give me this guy, it solves the problem, and it doesn't risk either side, like having a bickering match. Just hand him over. And Cisco's like, I can't do that. Like I have to balance Bajor and Federation interest, and you've got to take it up with them. Like Dinar doesn't he's not playing a political game. He almost seems like he would hate playing a political game, and he just wants this over with.
I mean, I think
Like, and
I think it's a good point because, it's kind of like what you pointed out before, where Cardassians seem to all have this double speak. When it's like, nah, it's really more Dukat and Garrick. Like maybe a lot of them
yeah,
are more cunning, but some of them are really just like this guy. They are a captain who wants to get the job done. They're not the same level as Dukat and Garrick. So
hmm
and by showing us Garrick, we know that they can do this with multiple characters, but they don't do it with this guy. This guy is very direct, very much just wants the job done. So it does give some diversity to how we view Cardassians. It also, again, maybe highlights something's up with Garrick. Why is he speaking like Dukat when very clearly not all Cardassians are like this?
Yeah.
Then we get the scene in Tana's quarters with Kira again. It's just more scenes to sort of reaffirm the divide that's sort of built up around them. Let's see. Trying to get to that scene. She's asking how long have you slept? How long has it been since you slept in a comfortable bed? Even though the bed they're looking at does not look comfortable at all. He's like, I can adapt to anything. Let's see. Kira's basically trying to tell him that he needs to kind of put away the old war ways, and they need to sort of move into a new way of doing things.
hmm
Tana kind of insults him, saying, I thought you were under Cisco's command. Kira's like, I am, but... And, like,
And
he's kind of calling out her new job, saying, like, this is a bit odd for you. You're not really doing what we should do. Kira's basically like, things have changed. She brings up the wormhole, and Cisco's the emissary, and Tana is very dismissive of it. He's not very happy.
She doesn't bring up the emissary.
No,
She just
okay,
brings
you're
up.
right. She just brings up the wormhole.
hmm
Which, the
Yeah,
wormhole, apart from being basically a holy site for them, is also the thing that's going to put Bajor on the map, and he doesn't want that.
yeah, he just wants Bajor for the Bajorans, and
Yeah.
it's like, and I mean that's kind of a fair point. Like having the wormhole there is what makes Bajor an attractive target again, because it comes up pretty regularly. Um, like Bajor has been effectively plundered in a lot of ways in terms of like natural resources and such,
Yeah.
and like in a way you could argue that even like the Cardassians were already on the way out because they've gone when they need it, and it's like it's been 50 years, they haven't accepted our rules. Just fuck it, let's just move on. There goes the monetization. I'm sorry, Hololix. But it's just like it's one of those things like if the Kardashians just left it because there's just no value in it now to keep the occupation going, and there wasn't the wormhole, Bajor could just like be left alone. It's not important. But
Yeah.
with the wormhole there, oh, now everything, the whole geopolitical,
Well, yeah, it's opening Bajor up to more problems.
yeah,
Like a lot of benefit. It's a high risk, high reward sort of circumstance. And I think we talked about.
yeah.
I'm not gonna. I would think every faction should be trying to vie for control of Bajor. Like we should honestly be seeing Romulans come in here and try and negotiate with Bajorans.
So the sort of issue is, so we kind of do see that later on. So we know the Cardassians are manipulating there. We know the Ferengi are going to be trying to go through the wormhole. And when later events happen with the Klingons, a certain someone says like, well, if they've gone back to the old ways, once they're done with this place, they're going to go for Bajor, because what's the point of holding the other place if they don't hold Bajor in the wormhole? I think the reason why the Romulans are not included is the situation with the neutral zone of they're not supposed to be operating beyond that or within that, and this is on the other side of the Federation, based on the various maps people have made.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just mean like it is so important. You honestly should be seeing more of
Yeah.
this stuff, but that's a different issue. With the scene with Kira and Tana, it is revealed that she's trying to talk to the ministers of the provisional government and try and get votes to grant him asylum.
Yeah.
So she
Uh, ac-
throughout a lot of this episode, she's basically going through them, and I think she eventually gets down to they just need one more.
mhm.
So
uh,
she's like, this is a good thing for you and any member of the Kanma because you can, who follows you, as long as they turn themselves in, they will be treated as citizens like anyone else.
yeah. Just so you have it, like, here's an example of the map that might be in place. It's
Oh
like,
yeah, no, there's a million maps and there's nothing canon in
yeah,
Star Trek,
but it seems to
unfortunately.
be, yeah, but I would say like this is pretty accurate to like get the idea. It's on the other side in another sector of the galaxy to the Romulans, and the Romulans, if I recall, they're kind of going through issues internally because there was the, what's her name? The daughter of Tasha Yar and Romulan, like the one who, they made to bring back the actress. Like she's doing her stuff. There's also the Spock situation
Yeah,
of like
I mean, I'm
dissident.
not saying they have to be here. I guess my issue is more, I don't know if the series really portrays a stable wormhole the way it should be. This is a big fucking deal. We got one situation in TNG where a supposedly stable wormhole was discovered, although it was later revealed that it was not. It opened into random locations,
Yeah.
and as a result, like you had the Ferengi, you had a ton of other factions basically vying for control and the singular rights to this wormhole,
Hmm.
but it didn't work out because the wormhole ended up not being stable. This is a stable wormhole. It's the only one that they know of. I'd imagine there should have been more wars fought over this, but I think it's really just no one's in the position to fight that war right now. And if it's a
Yeah,
stable
but
wormhole, it's not going anywhere. So let the Federation fuck around.
yeah, like so the Cardassians they just withdrew and they don't want to like. Sure, they rattle the saber at when there seems to be provocation, but they don't necessarily want the conflict. They're willing to just like poke and prod at the Federation. The Federation itself never wants a war. They never go swinging, like out of their way to go swinging. But when they do go swinging, they're probably the strongest power. And then like the
Well,
like every
I
other.
would actually argue the Klingons probably are. The issue is just more in the sense of,
Well, they're sort of like the Romulans because there's the internal power politics that
yeah,
are
that's
going on.
that's the bigger issue with them. I think if you were to actually take military might, the Klingons might be better. The problem is the Klingons are less. They have
Yeah,
less resources, I would say.
yeah,
So I don't know if they could ever really vie for long-term control. Like it would be a very, very lengthy war, and I think ultimately the Federation wins out because they're the most stable.
yeah. Plus, at the moment, they're allied with the Federation,
Oh
and
yeah, like right now
it's
they're
all
allies. It's just a matter of, yeah, it's just a matter of I think the factions are have their own unique strengths. The Federation is quite literally too big to fail.
yeah, like pretty much no one like anyone who would want to get the wormhole is either just not in position to do it in terms of resources and such, or they would very much be screwing themselves over on diplomatically, which you don't think Klingons would give a shit about. But we're dealing with Gowron, and
Yeah,
Gowron's a crafty little shit.
yeah.
Gowron is just
Well, Kira promises to help get Tana repatriated, and then we move to the promenade. Ah, yes, this is when we get the two Klingon women.
the Duras,
Yes, the
the
Dura
Duras.
sisters, characters from TNG who, I guess part of it, why you're bringing them here is to sort of show off the interconnected universe. This was a big deal. This was even before like Buffy and Angel in terms of having these different TV shows that happening at the same time crossing over from time to time. it obviously didn't do it to
Yeah.
the same extent as Buffy and Angel or something like that, but you would see
Yeah.
characters from one series move over to the other, and they would cameo, and it would be this better interconnected universe overall. Take that, MCU. But yeah, it's so this is I think this is the last time we see them because they're the characters that are relatively common in TNG, and then this is the last time we ever see them is this cameo in DS9.
Oh, we do. So they don't die here or get
No,
I don't think they're arrested, but they do appear in later on in Star Trek Generations. That's where this plot line ends with them. But in terms of like the TV shows, this is probably the last time. Uh, uh, but yeah, it's basically just like in a way, it's
they tried to get control of the Klingon High Council, started a brief civil war, and they've been basically banished from Klingon space ever since.
yeah, basically being renegades trying to like maneuver their way to starting the conflict again because again, there's no way to really accept them back in Klingon culture because Gowron's the leader and they're the ones who started this war. So, until they're dead, that conflict's not over. Like they're going to be like trying to restore their house and honor. Well, not
Yeah.
honor so much, but just their power
And this is where we get a very,
because
very big characterization thing for Odo because Cisco asks what they're doing. He's like, "Oh, they're sitting. They went straight to Quarks. They're not gambling. They're not eating the food. They're just sitting." Cisco's like, "I don't like it." And Odo just says, "Let's lock them up and call the Klingons to come get them." And Cisco's just stunned. He's like, "Odo,
oh
they
no,
haven't done
calm
anything.
down.
They haven't done anything yet." It's like, but they're enemies of the Klingon Empire. It's like they haven't broken any laws. You can't just throw them in jail. He says, Cardassian rule may have been oppressive, but at least it was simple. Uh,
Oh, Odo, you silly goober, being a fascist.
he is, yeah, he is very much like, let's see. He tells, also when he met with the sisters, he told them to surrender their weapons. Let's see. Or no, they didn't want to surrender their weapons. It's kind of like what caused this chaos. And Odo's
Yeah,
basically like, we have specific things. You can leave your weapons or leave this station, your choice, make it now. And
yeah,
Bator's just like, who are you? And he's just like, I'm the one giving you the choice. And he's like very intimidating when he does it.
yeah.
Let's see if I want to kind of get the scene. Yeah, leave your weapons, your choice. They're basically like spitting at him, like, who are you? This weird looking guy. Also, he's like, you're the one giving you the choice. Very intimidating. I think they probably respect that.
Yeah.
Let's see. I can't have these women on the screen too long. Dear God, their outfits.
Suddenly a rewrite of the series where it's like, we want that shapeshifter.
Yeah,
We want that.
but then he's just like, welcome to DS9 in his oh so polite way. And then that's when he goes and talks to Cisco. But
Yeah.
yeah, like
Basically,
Odo is shown to be very authoritarian. We get a lot more of that as the series goes on, but he is very much about the sort of simple view of justice and how it needs to sort of be executed.
yeah, swiftly and,
Well, I think
like,
I think he. We obviously get a lot more of this later on when we understand a little bit more about him, but and this isn't too much of a spoiler. While he doesn't know where he comes from, uh, as a liquid species, he comes from a collective of people, and as a
yeah,
result, his view is very much on. You could very much like simplify his view to the will of the many outweighing the needs of the few, and
yeah,
and that makes sense given what he's kind of from. They're part of this like subconscious collective that's all one entity, and he's like split off from that, but he doesn't remember any of that.
yeah. The collective one is, or the collective society or one is more important than the individual
Yeah,
droplets.
so when it comes to his sort of authoritarianism, it's like, yeah, let's arrest them because it's better for the whole station if they're in prison, even though it ultimately is goes against the Federation views and denies them their rights. So I mean,
Yeah,
obviously,
but
I
the
think
thing is,
when we get to his people are probably more based on his characterization because they wanted him to have some element of that. But
yeah,
as we see him now, he is very authoritarian. Part of that is shaped by his whole life was under Cardassian rule until relatively recently. So his views of organized like policing are largely influenced by Cardassian rule.
yeah. It's kind of funny, like because we know where the idea of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. It comes from Spock sacrificing himself, right?
Yeah.
And this is
Well,
almost
so
like the dark.
yes and no. He says that because it's the most logical thing, and then of course when it comes to the payoff, the needs of the needs of the few are his own. So it's a very callous line he would say, and you'd be like, oh yeah, it would be a logical Vulcan that says that. It doesn't really jive with Kirk and the Federation. But then when it comes to the needs of the many over the needs of the few, he puts himself in the situation of the few and sacrifices
Right.
himself. So the idea
Yeah,
there is, he is putting himself, like, his view is the pragmatic one, but he is willing to be the sacrifice if necessary, which vindicates the viewpoint, I would say.
Yeah, while here, this is like, oh, but, so in Spock's case, it's, what sounds like, oh, that's pretty authoritarian, becoming heroic because he's willing to sacrifice of himself. While Odo is, like, showing, like, this is just the pragmatic, like, like, dark side of it, of just like, yeah, like, if we want this situation taken care of, just like with Dinar, it's like, we could just take this immediate action, boom. And it's like, well, that's not looking at the the fundamental like nuances of the situation in these like the rights of people, like what needs to be considered.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. Anyways,
I mean, I think it's very interesting. I think like obviously Odo's not strictly a good person, but we can kind of see where he's coming from. We know that these two Klingons are dangerous. We know that it's his job to maintain order on the station. As far as he's concerned, he needs to do that. And I mean, arguably, he's probably right, and that actually probably goes to the greater like ideas of this episode. But we'll get to those.
yeah,
So, then we transition to Quarks. Man, we're only about like halfway through this episode right now. Not even.
yeah. Even when it's a B- episode, we can talk for a while. People, get
Well,
ready
again,
for every.
a lot of what we're talking about is how we know these characters progress going forward,
Mhm.
and really, it sort of shows that even in this kind of one-off episode that doesn't have too much to do with the greater story, it's they're very much focused on the characters and the people and the decisions they're making. So let's see. When we're in Quark's bar, we see the two Klingons sort of drinking. We see Bashir talking to Garrick again, and Garrick, he corrects himself. Excuse me, plain simple, Garrick. He said. Garrick's just like plain and simple. Join me, Doctor. Enhance my evening. Like just the way he speaks is always just so fun to listen. He's you almost can't hate him, but you know that there's something underneath the surface.
He's a bastard, but man, he's a likable.
Yeah, and then Bashir immediately calls him out, saying, "Oh, keep an eye on the ebb and flow of things, because the two, suspicious Klingons are here. So of course Garrick's also here." And Garrick responds with, "As a clothier, I have a keen interest on what the population is wearing in the day to day. Those Klingons have an odd sense of style. Don't you agree?" Like it's this double speak of like, everyone who listens to him, they know what he's actually saying, but he has this plausible deniability because he does. It's almost comedic. He's screwing with him. It's like, you know why I'm here, but I'm going to lie to you anyway.
Yeah.
So it's funny. Let's see. He also joked because he says, "I would say those two outfits are worth studying if you look closely."
Which is funny because cleavage.
Well,
Cleavage.
yes, like I said, I can't really put their outfit on the screen too long. I'd be worried about it. Oh my god. But it's interesting. It sort of goes to what you were sort of saying about him being a tailor. This idea of he almost has this excuse to watch people to study their outfits.
Yeah, like he's very
there's a lot of ways I
joy-oriented.
think they tie in his quote unquote choice of a career as a tailor into what he actually is, which is this duplicitous spy like person.
Yeah, another fun time it comes up, because there's two jobs he's mentioned to ever have, to my knowledge. Which one is the tailoring, the other one is gardening, and gardening also fits in as a spy because you're cultivating these like you're paying very much the individual details of these unique plants to cultivate them to bear fruit and
Yeah,
such.
I mean they thought
And
a lot
like,
about what they would do with Garrick and with what they sort of gave him.
yeah,
So I think it's always interesting. Also, again, like gardener, tailor, very unassuming jobs. You wouldn't look at those and think that person has the skills necessary that Garrick ends up having. But then we have Odo come in the scene and he gives a look at the two sisters as they walk out, and we see them in the cargo bay. We also see a suspicious rat across the screen, which, spoilers, it's Odo in a rat form.
yep,
And
he's a rat.
yeah, I remember I made a joke because I didn't remember he was a rat at the time. I was like, man, how does a rat get on the space station? Which
I don't know.
I mean, we know how we know animals do get on here, but it'd be almost funny, like, oh yeah, like a rat got on here because it was on a cargo freight and just got on the station. I'm like, okay, sure, I guess that makes some sense. I feel like it's weird, but I don't know how
Yeah.
space travel would necessarily work in the future. So we see these two Klingons start meeting with Tana. They ask, "Where's the payment?" He says, "It's on the way. That was not the arrangement." They're apparently providing him with some sort of material. Odo gets a spy on it. Odo spies on them, and Tana is getting something suspicious. I also want to point out, they say, like, your safety's not our concern, your gold is. So this is
Yeah.
funny because throughout the series, TNG doesn't have money. This series talks about gold, and they don't mention what it actually is, although they do later. It's not actually gold, because gold is worthless. Because you can just
Yeah,
replicate gold. Latinum is what is valuable, because you can't replicate latinum.
Yeah, and it's gold-plated latinum.
Yeah, but it is
Gold
still...
is basically just
Yeah, it is funny this is the only time I think they ever really say your gold as if the gold was the money.
Yeah.
Because, like, really, what
Well, no.
what they would say if this was, like, in later in the season is your latinum is what is important.
Yeah. I think it is brought up, like, gold is brought up again, in like one other context, and it's Quark saying like, we could like profit from this by selling it to some backwards people who still value it, because
Yeah,
there's
I
going to
mean,
be
you can always do that, but that's
yeah
probably like not super common. Not even just because it would violate the Prime Directive, but even just because, I mean, but not the Prime Directive, but like it'd probably be illegal. But it's
yeah
also just like you'd be putting yourself at risk trying to communicate with people and trying to sell them gold for what would they actually have that you would want.
yeah
So yeah, it's a weird little circumstance, but yeah, it's just a weird little line, kind of one of those little world building things. It's not a problem because again, gold plated latinum, that's what they probably mean. But so Kira, we then move to Kira. She has. Let's see if I can get like Cisco's funny little transformation. I just want to get this little transformation up. Come on. Let's see the great
right.
early '90s CGI effects. It's like a freaking Animorph.
I'm trying to get. Don't mention Animorphs to me. Oh my god, it.
But the effect does not hold up. It's yeah. Star Trek is not known for its special
Fine.
effects.
It's fine.
It's
I'll
weird.
just
It's a
say,
weird alien transformation sequence. Don't worry about how it looks.
yeah, it's like it's not like Terminator 2 with the new Terminator there where it's like liquid. It's like it's fine. It does what it
Although
needs to do.
I do gotta point out, he made a pretty convincing rat.
Hmm.
I always do find it funny because one of the reasons that Odo's face looks the way it does is because he's never able to really mimic the face properly.
Yeah,
I think we see a future version of himself at one point in the series where he's gotten a lot better at it. But
yeah,
it's like this issue, for some reason, he cannot mimic a face the way others, like, he can transform into things and people, or he can't really change into people, but he can change into animals. And I guess, like, the issue with that is a little bit more in the sense of, like, how is he able to transform into a convincing rat, but can't change into a person? I guess the face is just too complicated.
yeah. Like we're dealing with something that's not like in terms of like its expressions and such as complicated as humans. And two, it's a smaller creature. And three, like so they probably use an actual rodent,
Yeah.
like in the production of the episode. But the thing is, you don't really need to be that detail oriented, like to
Yeah, I
make
mean,
a
I was
convincing
actually going to
rat to
joke it.
the
It was like, oh, it's going
human.
to look like a Halo 3 rat or something, where it's just like polygons.
Yeah, but in the case of like here, it's just like a case of like you and I, when we see a rat, we just see a blur of motion usually because they're usually like running or something, right?
Yeah.
Scurrying away. You only need to get the details right enough to appear like fine for that because most people aren't expecting a shapeshifter. It's not like a CIA plot to turn a cat into a listening device. Like, and before anyone asks, that's an actual plot they tried to do. It immediately got hit by a car. It's
I didn't know
God.
that.
Yeah, they said it out there. It's like go to the Soviet embassy, and it like wandered over from the park, but it got hit by. Like it's real sad that it got hit by a car, but it's also just like, yeah, what did you expect?
Oh, God.
God,
But, yeah, so Odo listened to this whole thing. Obviously, at this point, a lot of suspicion towards the new Bajoran on the station.
yeah,
So, let's see. We got the command office. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Odo basically tells Cisco about the circumstance. Let's see. He says, oh, yeah, our reformed Koma, for example, is buying some strange stuff from two Klingons.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Here we-
definitely an issue. Let's see. Oh, we do get a conversation between Cisco and Kira. She's talking about, again, the minister's courts. He asks for predictions. She's like, look, I have 2 of the ministers. The smart ones are ready to vote for amnesty. I'm sure the other ones will fall in line. Let's see. Cisco's more or less on par with helping this guy at this point. He's kind of just in the matter of, like, I almost feel he doesn't want it in his hands. He understands that if he gives it over to the Cardassians will be happy, but the provisional government will not. If he gives it over to the provisional government gets to make decisions out of his hands.
Yeah. Plus, we brought this up earlier, and Kira, confirms like sort of the idea. Tana says 2 more of the Clone Ma are willing to follow him if you'll guarantee their safety, and so like done. That's his like, we got into it like if you want these people to come back, you've got to make clear like, listen, what happened. We're gonna let you walk with it. Just don't do it again.
Yeah, and we get a phenomenal scene where, Kira's like, I didn't think you would actually side with me. I wasn't sure. And he says, be sure to mention that next time you have a chat with Admiral Rollman. And he's standing above her on stairs, looking down at her, and she's just like confused. And he's like, go over my head again, and I'll have yours on a platter.
Oh. Well, before she gets to say anything in the moment, she just says, sir, and he's just like,
yep.
Yeah. And is like,
and she has like this look of like, oh man, I did fuck up.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, I think it really kind of, I think it probably hurts because 1, she was caught. 2, despite the fact that she went over his head, he still sided with her. It's that level of professionalism where he's doing his duty. He doesn't care that his, crew insulted. Like, in this whole circumstance, she's been putting her emotion into the whole situation, how she feels about this. Sisko did not. You went over my head. In a way, you betrayed me. Made me look like a fool. But I still sided with you because it was the right thing to do as far as I'm concerned. And I think that probably hits Kira pretty hard because I think she, in some way, kind of understands she's ignoring some real issues. She's not doing the right thing to do what she believes to be right, even though some information might be the contrary to that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very nice little scene where Sisko shows his professionality. Kira kind of realizes, darn it, I've screwed up a little bit. Like I've hurt my relationship with my commanding officer, all for my own personal gain. And even though I won, I don't feel good about it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good scene. I think it's something that, this kind of really shows the professionalism of these characters. You get a lot of it in TNG too, where it's never personal. It's really just more about, the idea of we have a job to do and we're people, so we're going to make mistakes. But at the end of the day, we have a job first and foremost. Our emotions come second.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think it's a great scene, and it is immediately followed with Odo giving the updates. Let's see. Oh yeah, they believe that the other 2 members of the Clone Ma that might be defecting are actually also in cahoots with Tana.
Right.
So the situation's becoming quite difficult, and Sisko's Odo wants to know if they should inform Kira on this, and Sisko's like, not yet.
Not yet.
So, I think he very much does not trust Kira at this point. I mean, twice now she's kind of gone over his head and screwed him over in a certain circumstance. I don't think he wants, considering how delicate the situation is, I don't think he wants her having any sort of real control here. I think he wants to basically say, look, you don't get this information just yet. It's not personal, but maybe it's a little personal. Maybe he is a little bit put off, but I like to believe it's not. I like to believe that what he's doing is based entirely on the pragmatic situation. Just because it also kind of gives him one over on Kira should not necessarily be considered.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then we return back to Garrick's shop. We see the nice clothing shop. The Klingon sisters return there. They say, we're not here to buy, we are here to sell. We understand that you represent Cardassian interests. And he's like, no, I'm a simple clothing merchant. I just do clothing things. He tries to give her an outfit, and they get like really insulted by it. He's like, oh, no, I didn't mean any offense. Let's see. Oh,
here they say gold press latinum.
Yeah, they do say gold plus platinum here. But let's see. They basically don't believe he's a clothing merchant. They want to see if he wants Tana Los. And Garrick is like, oh, you are in position to deliver the Bajoran to Cardassian authorities? It's like, if it's worth it, So Garrett kind of considers it. He puts some numbers on a pad. They get mad. He insults him. He's like, look, we're negotiating. So now it's putting into question, is Garrick actually a spy? And these Klingons are like clearly willing to betray Tana.
Yeah. Which, it fits like everything with Bator and lore stuff from TNG.
Yeah. I mean, they're not honorable people, but I find it interesting that all these pieces are still at play again. I think I really liked this episode because we have all these different pieces at play. You have Garrick, you have the Klingons, you have the Federation, you have Kira, you have the Tonma, or the Konma. I keep mixing their names up, but
Oma is the group. Tanalos is the guy.
I know. It's all fake though. So yeah, Garrick might be working with the Klingons and the Cardassians. Oh no. Spoiler alert, he's really not. So we have another view. We have another scene with Kira and Tana. Let's see. She has the third minister's vote. You're going to receive amnesty. Let's see. He kind of comments on how much of a politician she is. Let's see. Oh, this is where he also kind of admits, yeah, I am part of the Konma. I fight for the freedom of Bajor. You once fought for it as well. She says she's still fighting. He says you're deluding yourself. You're playing at a provisional government. So this is where like the mask is off. He has basically admitted, yeah, I'm still working with these terrorists. I am not reformed. I am not turning away from them. Let's see. He says, oh no, the violence is over. That's the truth. No one will get hurt in any way. I promise you that. But I need your help. So she's kind of pissed that she was lied to. Again, after that last scene with Cisco, she's kind of realized, oh, dang it, I really did screw up here.
Yeah. And she points out, like, you've already lied to me. I know how this works. And it's just it's kind of funny. With the mask off, she's realized, like, she was being naive about this. It's, like, as you said, like, she screwed up. Cisco was right to be hesitant about it.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, oh, I've fallen into the trap that, we used to play on Cardassians and such.
Yeah.
And now it's just going to keep going.
Well, it's also... she basically says, like, how do you know I won't just go straight to Cisco with this? He's like, if you do, we'll both know where your loyalties lie. And, again, he's really pointing out that she wasn't really, her loyalties weren't set straight. She didn't know what she was doing. She was very much, she didn't know all the factors at play, but she had already sort of made her decision. And that has now proven to really bite her in the butt.
Bite her in the butt.
Yep.
In the Bajoran butt.
So, I mean, I think, like, I do find it a little weird that he just is so open with her, but I guess part of him really does trust that she won't do anything.
Yeah.
It is probably a little bit weird considering how close he is to solving his plan.
Yeah.
Like,
but he might be.
I guess, like, let me try and, like, see what he says. Like, don't be naive, Major. If you expect me to help, keep me convinced. Let's see. I think part of him is convinced that she will join him. But
yeah,
I don't know why. I guess I just don't know why he would risk it. He doesn't need her. And ultimately, I do think it's probably a bad thing that he reveals this, because this is kind of what leads him to failing.
Yeah. Basically, if you just... I mean, if he hadn't, like, done this, and they've gone... what he could have done instead of, like, relying on Kira to give him the runabout and such, is when, like, he could have just, like, so they would have been expatriated, right? Repatriated to Patrol. When they were, he could have just taken the runabout, then, knocked out the person, and then flew it towards, the wormhole.
Well, yeah, we haven't gotten to his plan just yet. But I guess one thing that does maybe help him is she does admit, I don't want the Federation here, but for now. Like, and then she gets cut off. So
yeah,
I think it's like she kind of says, I'm on your side here, and he's like, okay, you want what I want, but what I want is a little bit like how I'm going to achieve that is extreme. So that's what he kind of reveals to her, and she's just like, let's see, oh yeah, he needs a small ship capable of warp speed, and yeah, he's basically like, yeah, it's a peaceful plan. I think he's a little bit deluded, but yeah, he's very much in the realm of he thinks they want the same thing. But he doesn't think that she's willing to do what is necessary anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think it's kind of interesting in terms of, like, a dynamic. Let's see, that scene kind of ends. Again, he's putting a lot of trust in her. If I was him, I'd, like, set blaster with like a phaser and on stun, although he might not have a weapon on him.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have revealed this. It is definitely questionable.
You should have just been quiet about
Yeah.
it. Just
Then we return to the Replimat with Bashir and Garrick. I love Garrick. He's my favorite guy. So
favorite guy. He never did nothing wrong.
I like this. Plain simple Garrick. How are you today? Says Bashir. He's like, be an observant, doctor.
No,
Garrick
he
says,
doesn't say
you
it
know,
like that. He like says it like being observant, doctor. He's no
Yeah.
longer jovial in the scene.
yeah,
Like,
he is pretty serious. Let's see. There's a time for levity, my young friend, and there's a time for genuine concern. The arrival on the station, for instance, of those 2 Konma terrorists. Let's see.
Yep.
And he doesn't really say too much. I must be going now. By the way, you look like you need a new suit.
Why this
let's
time?
see. You should come to my shop at exactly 20. Hold on. Let's see.
2055.
Yeah, 2055 hours tonight. I promise to show you a suit that will make you into a new man. And Bashir's just really confused. I thought we were talking about terrorists. Why are you talking about a suit now? He's like, Doctor, am I making myself clear? If you want to buy a new suit tonight, come to my shop at this time exactly.
Yeah. Double speak, Bashir. Double speaky.
And then, of course, Bashir's just like, yes, or excuse me, looks at the terrorist, I need a new suit, and like walks away awkwardly. Like, he finally gets it, and he's like, oh god, I gotta be a spy.
Lord, I'm actually being a spy, my wet dream. Oh no, I had to be competent.
Garrick's, I don't know what it is, I think it's the eyes, but even with all the latex mask on, Garrick just always looks so cheery.
Yeah. Cheerful as he just stares at you, which does come up of like someone does mention like the eyes, just something about his eyes, just him staring at you gets you, and it's like it messes you up.
Yeah, and then we return to ops. Kira's looking at the Conma activity report, so she's doing her sort of own research. And I remember finding this a bit weird because she's doing this research at a computer with her back to the rest of the operations room.
Yeah.
So like this is like I'd imagine she would only be doing this if no one could see what she's looking into, because this is kind of suspicious. Like even when she hears Cisco, she immediately switches the screen off, as if she didn't want to be caught looking at this. But her back was to the whole thing, so this is clearly suspicious. It's just kind of an issue, I guess. Let's see.
Yeah,
Cisco's talking about meeting the 2 Konma who just arrived. Let's see. Oh yeah, he's basically asking her, "Do you feel secure about these 2 coming on board?" She's very nervous, but she says absolutely. So she's kind of still not committed to siding with the Federation.
Yeah,
Let's see. Oh yeah, Bashir. Yeah, go on.
Hang on, let me look at the line again, how it's set, because I remember we had when we were watching this together, and she, yeah, no, I point out the absolutely, like that's not her, like the thing is so the question Cisco asks is, do you feel as secure about them as you do Tanalos? And she says absolutely. She's saying yes, she trusts them as much as she trusts Tanalos.
And
but
right
it's
now, she doesn't really trust Tanalos.
Yeah, it's dramatic irony that and doublespeak that only we as the audience can understand.
Yeah, but of course she's not committed to which side she's necessarily on right now, so she's not telling Cisco. So
yeah,
in a way, this is her not lying to him, but not being truthful. Which again,
it's lying by omission.
Yeah, it's a very good line, and it's immediately undercut with Bashir running into ops again, saying, "I need to buy a new suit." Commander Cisco, I need guidance. He's like, "Yes." It's like, it's about Garrick. I'm afraid this relationship has gotten out of hand. How's that? He's like, he wants me to buy a suit. A suit? Yes, it's exactly 2055 tonight. At why 2055? It has something to do with those 2 Bajoran terrorists on board. He says that together, he and I might discover what they're really doing. And Cisco's like, well, looks like you need to buy a new suit.
Yeah, and he makes a point of like saying like sometimes communications can't be conducted through official channels, aka he can't come to me. And maybe this is to say we have a common enemy. He's basically helping like Bashir to understand, like, listen, he can't bring this to me specifically. He needs you to be the like go between, and like to deal with this mutual situation of like, oh, this is gonna go badly for Cardassians and Federation.
Yeah, I mean, I think like this kind of shows a little bit more of the duplicitous nature of the Frontier sort of system, where Cisco kind of recognizes, yeah, we need to work with this guy who's kind of clearly a spy.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the way. I think that's very interesting that he does that, but I also like that he buys into it really quickly, while Bashir took much longer. Like
Yeah.
Bashir kind of like struggled with it, and then he runs here, and Cisco's immediately like, you could definitely use a new suit. Like, I think it shows a lot of the difference in the experience they have. So I like it. It's a nice little scene. We're also like breezing past this a lot. Oh, and we get a Kira Odo scene. I like these. So
Uh,
Kira basically is like talking to him. Some pretense small talk. Are all the security measures in place for the trip for the Minister's Court? He's like, I told you I'll take care of them. It's like, there's one thing about you humans I can't imitate very well. And he's like, patience. Or pretense. Yeah, pretense. So he's basically like, look, I know you're just asking this because you really are trying to build up to what you really want to ask. So just get to it. And then she's like, that's why I learned to respect your opinion. Never any pretense. How much do you know about me, Odo? He's like, more than you possibly realize. I like this scene a lot. It shows their like sort of not even budding friendship. They seem to be actual friends. Although I don't know if anyone would admit that. It's sort of a friendship of convenience. They're both surrounded by Federation people. They're really the only ones who knew what this place was like beforehand. So I do kind of like that sort of the start of their friendship is we both know like what we've done and how we've acted, and things are different now, but we have to sort of live with it. Let's see. She's like, I've done some things I'm not proud of. I still have nightmares about the raids on the Haru outposts, but at least I was sure of what I was doing then. He's like, is there something you're not sure about you're doing now? He's like, I have no more love for the Federation than you, or you have no more love for the Federation than I do. And he's basically trying to like pry into her. Let's see. Maybe there are still wars to be fought, and I'm just making a fool of myself doing it here. It's like, it sounds like you're trying to talk yourself into something or out of something. A lot of this dialogue is just so good. I have to just like read it verbatim. It's like, either way, I have to betray somebody. And Odo says the only important thing is that you don't betray yourself. It's like, how can I possibly turn against my own people? Are they your own people? They're no different than I used to be. Used to be, is what Odo says. He's like, I like this because Odo kind of realizes what we realize. She's conflicted, but I think at the end of the day, she already knows her answer, and she already knows her answer.
She just needs to like accept it and move with it. It's actually interesting. Because
Odo does use the. Oh, sorry, go
on. Like Odo gets put in this situation again where someone's like, "Oh, they've betrayed me," or like it feels like I'm betraying something, and he's like, uh, it comes up in the two-parter from season 4 where Cisco and him go back to Earth. I won't spoil what's happening there, but Odo's like, if they've gone against what you like, they swore to protect and such. You're not betraying them. They've betrayed you and what you stand for.
Yeah, and,
like
yeah.
Odo's very good about getting to the heart of like you're not like saying like by doing the right thing you're not betraying yourself. Like doing the just thing isn't a betrayal of yourself. Like it's like staying true to your ideals and morals, and like he's very good at pointing that out with characters because he knows like generally through that point what he is and what he would do.
Yeah, he makes a metaphor about talking about the Duranian ostrich, which hides by sticking its head underwater, sometimes even until it drowns. And Kira's just talking about how she doesn't know who the enemy is anymore, and without even responding to that, like Odo basically says Odo to Cisco with his badge, and says there's someone down here who wants to talk to you. Odo knows that she will make the right decision, that she was already committed to making the right decision. I think it's very interesting what you say about how Odo has this really strong sense of justice, because it ties into that nature of his authoritarianism we've seen already, where it kind of portrays the difference. Like, so I guess like, I mean, this is more of a discussion of like government philosophy, but authoritarianism isn't inherently wrong, but the problem is when bad people get in charge, it becomes bad. I guess the issue is more in the sense of like, you can't always trust good people are going to be in charge, so you shouldn't have a system like that. It doesn't work. But with Odo, who has such a strong sense of justice and right and wrong, him being authoritarian is almost not a bad thing. When he wanted to lock up those Klingons immediately, it's the issue of he knew they were going to be up to something. Cisco said, but they haven't done anything yet. And then immediately, like the next scene, they do something bad.
Yeah, it's
almost as if like Odo had been right. None of this would if Odo had been allowed to do what he wanted to do, none of this would have happened. He's a very, like, I think that's supposed to show the conflict of him. His viewpoint in authoritarianism is not something most people would agree with, but he is such a strong, justice-seeking person that it balances out in a way where you know he's not going to do anything wrong, even if you disagree with how he wants to go about it.
Yeah.
So I think it really shows a good balance of this character. I think it's something that we get a lot more of. And
Basically, if he suggests an extreme option towards something, it's like, okay, we're not doing the extreme option, but I'm taking you under advisement,
well,
like towards
I
it.
think a lot of what we see in the series, and we'll get to it when we get to the end. So at this point, we know that Tanalos is not a good guy here, or at least he's not what we thought he was. If the Federation had just allowed the Cardassians to capture this guy early on, the entire conflict of the episode would be resolved. Kira wouldn't have gotten no character growth, but the conflict would have been resolved. And that's a weird thing to do because up until this point, the Cardassians are the bad guys, aren't they? This episode does so much to show that the Bajorans aren't definitively good, the Cardassians aren't definitively wrong, and again, it just brings out this moral gray element of this series where there's not a right and wrong in this conflict. And when you have someone like Odo also representing that, where he's authoritarianism, something that's not really good, but he's a strong moral character with a strong sense of justice and someone who is very good at getting to the heart of the matter, getting rid of all the pretense and understanding the core of the issue. And from there, it's like, well, wouldn't it just be better if someone like Odo was in charge of everything? It's like, well, maybe. Like, that's kind of maybe the thought process is, maybe if we just did the pragmatic thing without any of this pretense from the very beginning, none of these problems would happen. But at the same time, if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have these character growth. Kira would not have gotten this opportunity to grow as a person were it not for this conflict.
Yeah.
So I think that might be something you could sort of talk about in the nature of, letting people fail on their own.
Yeah, there's also something interesting with another character of basically the motivation for their action. Why does Garrick but go behind the Klingons to say to Bashir and by extension Cisco, you need to keep an eye on this. I think it's because for them, if he had just taken Tonalos and paid the Klingons for him, it would have worked out for the Cardassians. I think in a way, in the case of Garrick, just for his motivation, because there's an odd choice, like there's a simpler option here. I think he realized ooh, we don't want to work with Lursa and Bator because it's probably the talk of everything of oh, these are renegades who try to, overthrow the Klingon Empire's regular if they worked with them and established that pattern, if he did that, it's that would hurt my chances of staying on the station, getting
who knows? I don't think Garrick ever really meant to betray or to work with the Cardassians. I don't know if he can, but
with Klingon.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think you could. I don't think you could ever actually secure contacts with Cardassia.
Well, he says later on that he has contacts. And
yeah, but I don't think he would be able to get the military to come pick up a prisoner. He might be able to, but I guess it's more of an issue of, again, we know that Garrick doesn't really plan on giving this guy over. That's why he talked to Bashir, but it's kind of like he at least pretended he did.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, that's really the next scene. We get to Garrick's shop. Bashir walks in. Garrick's a little angry because he's 2 minutes late, and shoves him in the fitting room with some shirt or something or a jacket, and tells him just to stay in here. While Bashir is in there, just sort of standing in the changing room, we do hear someone come in. Let's see. Yeah, we hear Bator. Savior welcomes Cardassian. Do your people want the Bajoran or not? Garrick says, I can now venture to say with some certainty that you will receive the agreed upon payment on delivery. And yeah, go on.
Just the wording of that is so political, and it's I can now say with some certainty that you will. It's he's not saying, oh, we can definitely pay you. On the.
Yeah, it's quite literally the way he talks is just, it's almost like even when he's not trying to lie, it sounds like a lie.
Yeah.
Because there's not really a lie here other than, with some certainty. How much certainty? 0. Or 1%.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of him is really just I don't think he can turn it off. He's almost constantly just in this state of, yeah, everything I'm going to say is going to sound like a lie because I'm so used to lying at this point.
Yep.
Let's see. Yep. So, the Klingons want to capture Tanalo. Let's see. Garrick's trying to inquire what other business they want with him. let's see. I'm trying to
Oh,
get
yeah,
like. Oh,
turn.
apparently he wanted them to. He had them deliver a cylinder of bellitrium, which is we later learned an incredibly like explosive substance or unstable substance.
Hmm.
So a rare crystalline element that can, yeah, Garrick explains it's a rare crystalline element that is incredibly powerful source of energy, provided of course one has an antimatter converter, which again we know that he wants a warp capable shuttle, which has an antimatter converter,
Yep.
and that's why apparently the Cardassians were chasing him is because he stole an antimatter converter engine. Which, yeah, that ultimately means he's planning on creating a bomb of significant destructive capability. Now, he already said that he doesn't plan on hurting anybody. So why does he need a bomb? I think you pointed it out earlier. He's going after the wormhole.
Yep.
He wants to blow up the wormhole, get rid of it, take Bajor off the map, and ultimately like turn Bajor into the backwater planet that no one wants to interact with, so that they can fix themselves up without any interference.
Yeah. If that's even possible.
I mean, yeah, I don't really know if Bajor offers anything else other than the wormhole at this point,
Yeah, it's like
other than those cool
it's very much a
popsicles.
charity in the cabbages.
That's true.
In the
Yeah.
cab.
Well, actually, I don't think we get the cool popsicles until next time. I'm not gonna lie. Everyone like, oh yeah, it's this cool like fruit popsicle that's always offered on the promenade. But I'm not gonna lie, it looks like a giant tongue.
Yeah, it's like a giant tongue, and it's like
It's like
made from the
it
sap of
looks
the
like almost
dung
like a
beetle.
piece of frozen fruit on a stick, which is like, okay, that's kind of cool. But I remember always seeing it. I'm like, it looks like a tongue. It looks like some like giant monster tongue
Something
that they
that's
cut
gonna
off and
like
put on a
roll.
stick.
Yeah, something that looks like it would roll cherries on its tongue while making a weird sound.
Okay, you know what? You've outed yourself as a JoJo fan. I'm gonna have to kill you now.
Oh, it's the guy who. Oh my god.
All right. Anyway, with we return back to ops. Let's see. Cisco's like, look, we have nothing to hold them against. They haven't committed a crime yet. Oh, Odo's yeah. This is another authoritarian Odo. Conspiracy is a crime. Conspiracy to what? We don't even know what their plan is. Let's see. Da-da-da. Oh yeah, like O'Brien points out, we know they were holding the components for an explosive device. That should be enough evidence. Kira agrees with that. Cisco also in agreement. I guess like that. He basically says, "Yep, that's enough, O'Brien. Like that's what we could do." And let's see. Oh yeah, and Kira basically says, "I have to be on the shuttlecraft when they do the trade."
Hmm.
Cisco doesn't agree to it, but she basically, at this point, she's admitted that she knows what's happening, and they're ready to stop his plan. She's fully sided with the Federation here. She explains that Tom doesn't know if he can trust me. If I try and stay behind, he won't buy into this. I have to be on that ship so he believes it's true. So I like that. I do like that she's putting herself at risk because of her own mistake.
Hmm.
It's a it's a little bit of redemption for her kind of her acting, not acting like as the actor, but like how she's been kind of acting and how she's been kind of possibly allowing this terrorist to do what he needs to do. She is basically putting herself in danger to solve this problem, and it's a good thing. It's a really good character moment for her.
Hmm.
And then Cisco and O'Brien are going to take a runabout on the other side of the moon that they plan on doing the trade, so that they can try and I guess interfere when shit goes bad. So let's see.
Yeah.
Dax gets her like only scene in this thing where he's like, "Stay in touch on the channel," but she doesn't actually say anything.
Yeah, like there was a moment early on when Bashir did his little like, oh, he spoke to me. Yeah, like she made some like teasing comments, but it's like,
Yeah, it's almost
yeah,
funny that like we don't have anything for you to do this time, so just show up for like 2 days for filming and that's it.
like one or two lines. There you
Yeah,
go.
I mean
Okay.
that's just the nature of this. I mean, Jake doesn't have any scenes. Quark doesn't have any scenes at all. I don't think he might be in the background of the bar scenes, but
Yeah,
no
he's
real like substantive stuff. So I mean, I like it. It's this element of not everyone's going to be important every single time. So I mean, they do that with TNG occasionally.
yeah.
So we get a lot of plot stuff happening. It gets kind of complicated. So let's see. I mean, I remember complimenting a lot of this with like, oh yeah, there's some good updates with a lot of good military sort of decorum and jargon and stuff like that. Let's see.
Uh,
They do the trade off. The Oh yeah, we get the funny names of the ships. We get the Ganges and the Yangtze Kang. I don't know if those are references to something.
they're for the Ganges and Yangtze Key are like rivers. That's something they bring up of like, yeah, all their runabouts are named after rivers on
Oh, okay.
Earth.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why they have the Rubicon, and then had another one because one got destroyed, and I can't remember if Rubicon was the replacement or the one that got destroyed. Runabout, but yeah, like they have a naming thing of the class of Runabout is also the Danube. Uh,
But yeah,
like
so they do the trade. Tana gets the antimatter converter. Kira, plays dumb. What's that about? Like she, as if she doesn't already know. Let's see. They transfer over the 13 kilograms of gold pressed latinum. I remember we commented that later in the series they just sort of go to slips, bars, and like other like definitive forms of measurement for these. But here they're talking about like kilograms.
yeah,
So I mean, honestly, kilograms probably makes more sense considering it's a liquid. Like it's a
yeah,
liquid that you basically like fill a bar with or a slip with, and if any of it is not in the bar, you'd want to know that.
yeah.
But I guess like as a default measurement, like oh yeah, bars, slips, chips. What else is there? There's like
So bar slip strips. There was a fourth one that doesn't ever really come up much.
bricks.
Hang on, memory.
There was
Yeah,
bricks. Yeah,
yeah, bricks, and no, I think there was a fifth one too because bricks isn't what I was thinking
and
of.
of course, there's no
Denom
understanding of how valuable these things are.
Yeah,
But apparently,
there's
13 kilograms of gold pressed platinum is worth an antimatter converter. So there we go.
yeah, what they negotiated to be the proper exchange. Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah. So the two sisters they leave. They're out of the show because they don't have anything else to do. They did the trade. Pretty. I almost like it. It's a little subversive. They were kind of being traitorous, but in the end, they just sort of leave when they get what they want.
Hmm.
So let's see.
Uh,
Then the Cardassian warship starts coming in. Benjamin tries to intercept them. Let's see what else is happening. Oh yeah, at this point, Kira basically comments like she kind of knows what's happening, and she's not like he admits he's gonna try and blow up the wormhole. She doesn't want that to happen, and I remember commenting he just goes right for the fucking punch.
yep,
Like the second he kind of suspects that she's not in on this, he's just like, nope, punch her as hard as possible.
yep.
He doesn't even like hesitate, and I almost kind of like that because that kind of reflects the idea that he is this like really like long-term like freedom fighter. He doesn't take chances. He has high reflexes for these sorts of things. Any amount of betrayal needs to be dealt with swiftly. So it almost like let's see if I can actually find the proper scene where like it happens because it is just like super sudden. He stands up, he's not even looking at her, and then whoop turns around, haymaker right to the face. Let's see here. I had not been keeping up with it on the stream. I apologize. Let's see here.
I want to make fun of him. He didn't keep up with it, the fool.
No. Oh yeah, okay. I got this. I got the scene. Let's see if I can play a little bit of it. So yeah, they're talking about the Cardassian warship coming in. He's talks about how the Klingons must have sold them out. Although we don't actually ever know that. Let's see. Kira kind of wants to abandon the mission at this point because she's like, yeah, it's too dangerous now. We can't do it. Again, she's trying to convince him not to do something. He walks over to the antimatter converter. She stands up. We don't even know what she's doing, but he doesn't even hesitate to just slap her in the face as hard as he can.
He hears motion and it's like, oh, he doesn't know he can trust her, and why would she need to get up? It's like,
Yeah, I mean
pop
that's
her.
exactly the thing. It's like it's kind of interesting. It happens so suddenly, it's almost comical. But when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense for his character when he doesn't know if he can trust her right now. Any action she
Yeah,
takes is questionable. So when she stands up to walk over to him, he just decks her, and they get in a bit of a fist fight as he well actually not even that long of a fist fight. He knocks her to the ground and then grabs a phaser and immediately
yeah,
basically takes her hostage. So I mean,
yeah.
again, it's just it's a pretty good scene, I suppose. Like at the end, like it's done pretty well. Let's see, what happens after that? She doesn't. They have another like sort of conversation about like the nature of what it is they're doing. Let's see. I'm trying to find like the actual dialogue. Da-da-da. Where is it? I think. Yeah. So after Tana like holds her up, he basically admits his whole plan about wanting to blow up the wormhole, take Bajor off the map. Let's see. Benjamin and Cisco are basically like, yeah, we're heading back to the station. Let's because the trade is done. Oh yeah, The Cardassian guy Duras is back, and he's just like, or Dinar. I'm glad we're finally
Yeah.
on the same side, Capt Commander. And this is like where we kind of got to the point where it's like, yeah, if you just sided him at the beginning, at the end of the day, this would have been a lot simpler. But that's just the way it is.
Yep.
Also, if anyone
Yep.
fires on the runabout, it will probably detonate the device, which, as it would be right here, it would like hyper irradiate the system. Is I
Yep.
believe what they would say. So it's super dangerous to use it right now, and they have to get it
I
far enough
wanna
away
make
from the station. Yeah, what?
I want to make a comment, but it get us demonetized. It would definitely get us demonetized.
Yeah, don't say it. But what I would argue is, I mean, it's not like we're making any money off these anyway. But what I want to say is they're too close to the station right now, and
Yeah.
so it would hyper irradiate the station. So they need to somehow get it away from the station to disable this device. Let's see. They're working with the Cardassians, which again, this kind of portrays the idea of who's the good guys and bad guys here, because the Federation's not working with the Cardassians against the Bajorans, although it's a Bajoran terrorist group. It's a little bit weird.
Yeah.
I do
Well,
think. Yeah, go on.
it's a Bajorian terrorist group that has murdered leaders of Bajor because it's like you're no true Bajoran.
Yeah. They're
Yeah.
talking about how we're 100,000 kilometers from DS9 and closing. You know, I guess they're moving at some form of warp. We don't know what level. Let's see. So she basically says this is your idea of a non-violent solution, and oh yeah, and his comment is she comments there's Bajoran civilians on the station, and this is where he reveals it's not DS9 he's after, it's the wormhole. Let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see. She says you're only hurting Bajor by doing this. He wants her to. She forces a drop out of warp, which causes like some turbulence. Let's see. I want to see exactly how she does it. Let's see. He wants her to drop out of warp. He threatens to kill her. She does that and causes the entire ship to basically like flip around. Gives her an opportunity to sort of fight him and wrest him. And let's see. What do they do? Oh, I think they go through the wormhole all the way through it and detonate the device on the other side. Is that what they do? Yeah, I think that's what they do.
So yeah, they go all the way through, and he tries at the last moment he tries to launch it, but they're already on the other end, and it launches out. And because they're no longer at warp, I think they're at impulse. It means that it just the particles are not going to spread to anywhere that's really habitable, so it's fine. Like ships are shielded against it and such, so it's fine from there.
Yeah, and of course we saw the situation where she is still technically held hostage by Tana. Let's see. He says, "Damn you! You've ruined my plan." Let's see. So they say you can either surrender now to me, or let's see, to the Cardassian ship that's on its way. At which point he immediately surrenders. So he knows that he can't kill Kira because otherwise the Cardassians get him. At least this way he can be arrested by the Federation or Bajor.
Yeah, it's like, one of these two is gonna result in less torture. I'm gonna go with less torture, Chief.
Yeah, and let's see. Kira tells him that the old ways don't work anymore. Everything's different now. I had to do this. One day you'll understand. He just calls her traitor.
Traitor. Yeah.
Traitor.
Yep.
And we have what I kind of like is a nice scene. Cisco walks up to Kira. She looks like she's about to cry because she basically had to betray someone she considered very similar to herself. Yeah. And Cisco doesn't even say anything. He looks like he wants to say something, but he just sort of they just sort of have a nice little heart-to-heart look, and they both walk off into the station side by side. I mean, I think it's really nice because he understands how hard this was for her, and he understands that she's kind of betrayed a part of herself.
Yeah.
And
betrayed her heart and soul.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to say anything to hurt that relationship. That's I think this is really the start of their friendship. It is really just them being a lot more respectful of one another. And
I'm not your enemy.
Yeah, I mean this is a very big part for their being good coworkers essentially. But yeah, that was the episode past Prologue. It was a lot more in depth than I thought it was in terms of conversation. We're almost as long as we were for the episode of Emissary we talked about.
Yeah, well, a lot of stuff is done here.
I mean, we had a lot to say about Emissary in this episode, about how things from there carried over to here. We introduced fan favorite character Garrick, and
the best character.
Yeah, arguably the best character. So, I think that the standouts for this episode are a lot of the Kira Odo dynamic. We got, the introduction of Garrick and Bashir dynamic, which, we're going to get a lot more going forward. We really I don't know if you would say we start or finish Kira's arc here, because this is a pretty big arc, decision she's made. I think she has a longer arc that this plays into, but this is an arc in and of itself.
Yeah, this is like, basically, I would say this is the start, because now we're going to have later episodes where she's constantly struggling with letting go of that past and moving on from it.
Yeah, and also just dealing with the consequences of it.
Yeah.
And, I really do like... Honestly, you gotta give the showrunners credit. This is I would not say that this is a weird episode to do as your second episode, effectively, because you have the first two episodes, which are, part 1 and 2. But those episodes kind of portray, the Cardassians wronged the Bajorans are now, the victims, and we're trying to help build them up to the Federation. To have an episode that very clearly does not portray the Cardassians as the bad guys, but rather kind of portrays a sect of the Bajorans as the bad guys, I think that is a pretty risky move, and I think they pull it off very well. I think that could have gone very differently. You could have really confused a lot of viewers on how am I supposed to feel about Cardassians, how am I supposed to feel about Bajorans.
Yeah.
And it sort of shows it's not good and
early
evil.
on. You need this early on to make clear, it's not like black and white. It's a lot of
and it's not that Kira, I think a lot of it helps that you're showing it through the perspective of Kira, who is struggling with this thing, but also it's not a major part of the Bajorans. It is a terrorist faction that may or may not want to be reincorporated into Bajor. So it's a smaller issue ultimately, but it's a lot for Kira. It's a lot for how the Federation is going to handle these situations going forward. When I say this is a B- episode, it is because there are problems, but there's a lot of good stuff here.
Yeah.
If this is a B- by DS9 standards, I'm not gonna lie, this would probably be maybe a low A by TNG standards.
Yeah.
This is the reason. I remember even when I was reviewing, I was like, yeah, this is a B- because there's a lot. We're looking at some of our favorite episodes. In the Pale Moonlight, It's Just a Paper Moon, Duet. Those are the A tiers. So it's hard to put this on that level, but this is definitely a decent episode. I think it says a lot about what the series is going to do. It shows a lot of Kira. There's some issues. I think Tanalos does some things that are far too risky for his plan. I think there's some elements where we're not really addressing how the relationship between Kira and Sisko should be, given the fact that he's the emissary. There's definite issues in terms of the greater scope of the series, but in terms of effectively a non-introductory episode, the first episode of the series that's not just the prologue or the pilot, essentially, this is a pretty good first episode. What would you say?
Yeah, it's a good episode. I'd just put it at a B generally, rather than a B-. It's the issues you point out are there, but I don't think they hold back from the sort of point that is coming up of this is this is an ongoing issue that'll come up as Sisko commands the station, and Kira acts as the liaison officer. How do we balance these two at times conflicting set of concerns, and what does that speak to for these characters, especially Kira?
I think we get a lot of really good character stuff here. I think we get a lot of good world building and plot stuff, and a lot of stuff is really thematic on point for what we're doing in DS9 going forward. I would say Sisko wasn't even necessarily that much of a standout, but the few scenes where he does give a lot of opportunities to flex his acting chops really do stand out. I think, him bringing up the fact that he knew about Kira talking to the Admiral is the standout for the episode. It's a really good scene. But I think Kira is, she's the main character of this episode, and we get a lot of good character stuff with her. But yeah, ultimately a very good episode. That is the episode 3 of DS9. Hopefully we will have the 4th and 5th one coming out soon. Anything last you want to say?